OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Yeah, very good morning to you. Welcome along to Wednesday morning's OTB AM, I want to say. We've a specially extended show for you for the duration of lockdown. We're going from 7:30 AM until 10 o'clock every weekday morning. If you want to get in touch with us, you can WhatsApp us 0879 180 180, or of course you can get us on Twitter at Off the Ball. You can leave a comment on whatever stream you're watching this on. If you're listening on Sports Radio, probably the best thing to do is 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Coming up a little bit later on, we have a very special culture club in association with Now TV. Singer-songwriter Dermot Kennedy is going to join us to talk to us about Gladiator. It's a great chat. We recorded it a couple of days ago. He likes Gladiator as a movie, and he's got good reasons for it. Also, he's having an amazing time at the moment, notwithstanding the fact that we're all locked in our houses. We are also bringing you the Mount Rushmore of Cork, the 4 best sports people in Cork history, and this is no easy feat. Colm Boohig has an idea of who he wants on his Mount Rushmore, and the rest of us are going to shoot that down. So that's coming your way at around about 8:30 this morning. Sports pages. And before all that, we're going to get into Brian O'Driscoll and Ronan O'Gara, who joined Joe Malloy last night on Off the Ball for a chat about their careers. Have a look.
Okay, you're welcome along. So we have a special rugby slot this evening. I'm very happy to say we've dragged in the big dogs. We have Brian O'Driscoll standing by. Hello.
Hi there, Joe.
And we have Ronan O'Gara from La Rochelle. Hello, Ronan.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Brian.
We've had a lovely sunny day here. How's the weather where you are, Ronan?
Turning. We had a desperate day yesterday and poor morning, but maybe it's just us, but the sun is emerging and the gloom is beginning to be left behind. So hopefully potential evening swim ahead, but maybe not.
Is that not Access Entre D, no?
Access Entre D, oui. Yeah, it is, but living on the beach, you can slip in and slip out and say nothing. But it's great for the head.
All 7 of you?
No. Honestly, you wouldn't be allowed. No chance. You'd be instant €135 fine or 200. And I used to play rugby for Ireland. There's none of that.
You wear your La Rochelle gear down the beach?
Yeah, my black and yellow Speedos. Some sight. With the 2 Spanish onions stuffed inside. Oh, my brother-in-law told me that one. It was brilliant. Sergeant Gary McPolan, thank you for that.
Oh, Gary.
Inspector, yeah, you know.
Long time since I've heard that name.
Yeah. Long time since you're all there with him 15 years ago. Joe, we don't get out often, do we?
This is clearly the first adult conversation you've had in a few days. Brian,
yes,
how are you?
Exactly.
I'm good, Joe. I'm good, like all things considered. Yeah, it makes it easier with a beautiful day out there. I don't have a huge back garden, but it's to be able to get out and just soak up a few rays of sunshine, changes the mood a little bit. I've been pretty quiet the last while, but I've had a busy morning this morning. I had a couple of calls and things. So yeah, it does actually, it feels good to be busier. It feels as though you're adding value to the world, whereas sometimes when you're sitting on your hands and trying to pass time, it becomes a frustration. So I think that's why it's important to make sure that you kind of schedule out your day and you don't let it just whittle away, that you actually plan some things to achieve them and whatever that might be entail. So I made some brown bread yesterday and I'll make some scones later on in the week. So flat out here.
Where did it all go right, eh?
Brown bread's good, though. Brown bread's good. Geraldine O'Driscoll recipe, yeah.
And Phil Vickery has 1 or 2 ideas on that.
Well, yeah, he's quite a chef, though. I think he's recently just opened his own restaurant that then obviously clearly had to close. But he won. I think he might have won Celebrity MasterChef. He's a proper chef.
Oh, yeah, he seems to specialise in bread. I think. Yeah. Okay, so it's a niche market, bread. Sourdough.
Well, I haven't been so bold to go sourdough yet, but that's my next incursion next week.
Okay.
Brian, over the last couple of weeks, we have had Peter Stringer on with Ronan and David Humphreys on with Ronan, chatting about their, well, in the first case, relationship, and in the second case, I suppose, rivalry with them. So we might jump off on that point. There are other things I do want to talk to you about. What emerged in those two chats, and by Roger's own admission as well, is that he was a cranky so-and-so as a player. Was he cranky with you? Was he good to work alongside? I know you had a pretty good relationship with him. Your memory of him as a player?
Yeah, he was cranky. I think you want that though as well. You want a little bit of narkiness in your 10, demanding of one another, setting high standards. I started just, Rog broke onto the Munster scene before I did with Leinster and Ireland. So he was there for maybe a season or certainly half a season. Then I got capped out of nowhere. So when he came properly into the international fold, he had a bit of credibility in the bank already with playing, provincially. So I'd watch that, and I think as a teammate, you look and you judge people from the demands they put on themselves and the demands they put on everybody else. And you could tell from the very off that he wanted to be a high achiever, that he wasn't happy with mediocrity. And I think it was part of that group of players that came through into the international fold that changed the face of Irish rugby from the doldrums of the 90s into a far more positive place where the expectation was to win more than you lose. And we immediately struck up a good partnership. I think part of that comes from a respect for one another on what you are doing on the training park and then at the weekend in matches, but also the rapport that you strike up off the field and the laughs that you have and the chemistry that you might have as well. And so tying all of that together has a big outcome to your overall relationship. And I think that's why we got on so well, and that's why we continue to get on so well, because in some ways we're vastly different, but in many ways we're kind of kindred spirits too.
Ronan, on the field, did you see the game in a similar way? Was there a good chemistry from the off?
Yeah, there was. It was really good, really easy. It was unbelievable for me to have a 13 like that in terms of, I think I've said it to you before, Joe, where I suppose our money ball became a skip one, which shouldn't be the case, but the way the game was back then, obviously if Brian was marked by one man, you were kind of rubbing your hands. If it was two men, not too bad. Three men, he could still probably find something. And our lines of running probably needed a bit of work to do, but that's when I think really around 2000 onwards, there was an emphasis on backline play and strike moves. And I can remember in our first game against Scotland on, it's actually the 19th of February 2000 against Scotland in Lansdowne Road. I think we'd played a practice a move all week. Kind of first time video analysis from my point of view, really, to see the power of it. Obviously, we constructed this is how Scotland will defend against us if we do it like this. And we pulled off a play, and Shane Horgan went straight up the middle of the pitch. And it was his first game as well. And I think he had passing options on both sides, but as happens in your first cap, he just saw a haze of black and just ran into the only Scottish defender. But that it was just.
Was it a Hendo wing, Rog? Was that a Hendo wing? Yeah.
Yeah. So was it 10 to 12 back to 10 with 13 short?
No, 10 to 12.
Oh no, sorry.
No, 10 to 12 back to 10 with 13 breaking wide and winger coming inside 13.
Yes. Yeah, with 15 or 14 wide.
Yeah.
Or sorry, no, 11 going out the back, isn't it?
That was it.
Dennis was excellent at with his speed in attracting defenders. Yeah, sorry. So get back to the point. It was very easy for me, Joe, to strike up a relationship. I think, and something now that I always would refer to in my coaching career. I think there was great connections in that Irish team from 2000 on, and I think where I started off, I was lucky in the fact with Munster we had Keith Wood that came back for maybe 1 year, I think, from Harlequins, and that was the 99-2000, the season that I lost the final that season. But he really accelerated, I suppose, professionalism for a lot of us, because I think if you recall, that Harlequins team had a backer, and they basically, it was nearly like a World 15 at club level, and we had them in our group, I think, the previous year, and then Woody came and played with us, but he really brought things on, and I was lucky enough to kind of go as to the World, not to the World Cup, but as a kind of a training replacement to the World Cup training camps, and to see the best of the Irish stock. So it was, once you got in there, it was when you had someone like Brian younger than you, but obviously better than you, it was still a huge comfort for me, because at 10 it's a big ask, and you know what I mean, Claw, Golov, a lot of them were Munster forwards, but you essentially, your role is to push them around the park.
Very quick tangent, that move you mentioned there from 20 years ago now, is that obsolete, or is that something you as a coach now could spring and it would work very well?
Yeah, they're all coming back. It's amazing. Like the big thing about the Dan Carter line is the simple things done well over and over again. Never has it applied more, especially in the modern game. His capacity to say square at the line and deliver passes, I think, is what separates him. But the moves now are, like, Brian would know more on this. The fact, like that, the Leinster special play with Johnny to Darce, or Contepomi to Darce, to either Drico on a hit line or out the back to the 10, was done by the Brumbies, I would say, probably in the 80s maybe. That try that Ireland conceded in the left-hand corner in Lansdowne Road in the World Cup against 91 against Australia, when Lina gets in. I think the start of that is the same framework as a Brumbies, or I don't know what Leinster used to call it, but it's a really hard move to defend if it's done well with multiple threats. I suppose that's the point I'm trying to make.
It's just on that play, it's so so funny listening to commentary sometimes. So we see the Leinster wraparound play as well. It's not just a wraparound play. We got someone popping in. Rog, say hi. But it's not just a wraparound play. The thing is, it's an undefendable play if you all run the right lines. And that's the thing. If people run lazy lines, you're dead, because then it's just laterally, you're going to be shipping the ball on to someone that's going to get annihilated. So
yes,
it's the selflessness of those that aren't going to get the ball is the difference between the success of a play and it falling flat on its face.
Right.
And they have to show the same deception. They have to show the same interest. If you start running and you don't have your hands up, you're not getting the ball. You got to run as though with intent, as if someone, occasionally might throw you the pass just to keep you honest. And that's what we used to talk about at training the whole time, is if you're not an option, if you drop a ball because you're not an option, well, it's going to be on you. That might be you in a game. So at all times, everyone always had to be an option. And if you're an option, then you're there to take it. And if someone, be it Rog or Contepomi or Johnny, decided to throw that short pass to keep you honest, you better hold it.
And Brian, Ronan mentioned there that on more than numerous occasions you might have had two men keeping an eye on you, and maybe on a bad day three men keeping an eye on you in your real pomp. So I suspect quite often you were just decoy, were you? Yeah,
there was a bit of that. I think probably defenses were very different then as well. Very, very soft. And so, we talk about that flat one or a Frano, as it was known. I don't know if I've ever said why it's known as a Frano. So I almost got nicknamed Frano after Neil Francis, because I was injured at training a couple of times in my first few outings with the Irish team. Eric Elwood was like, Frano, he's back, here's Frano. Frano was always injured and then played all the games. And this was an appalling nickname to get hold of. So anyway, I managed to shake it, but we held on to the Frano, the flat one, as a name. I don't think they use it anymore. I'd be surprised if they do. But that used to be a go-to play of ours. But so defenses were vastly different, and it's not like for like these days. But sometimes you'd get a little bit more attention, and then the knowledge is that you knew somebody else had more space somewhere else, and you had, that was your responsibility of trying to run the decoy line, but run it with the same intent as if you were going to get it, to stick those defenders and create space for the Dennis Hickeys or Shane Horgans or Jordan Murphys or Irvin Dempsey's. Actually was doing a little bit of homework today and looking back on the Ireland-New Zealand game in Chicago, and it's the small things. I actually put a post up of it on my Instagram of Simon Zebo, of exactly what Raj was talking about, Dan Carter, of that taking the ball to the line, sticking the inside defender, having the second defender having a little look in, but then still throwing the pass. And it's the simplicity of catch pass. But if you don't take it with intent, where you look as though you're a threat yourself and you just ship it on or run across the field, the play is null and void.
Yeah.
Everybody has to show intent that they're potentially a ball carrier themselves. And the knock-on effect is it creates space in the wider channels, and that's what happened on this occasion. Ireland nearly scored a try from it, but it's a vastly different game than the one in 2000 when Raj came onto the international scene, and it's kind of apples and pears.
Sure, no, I accept that. Ronan, you spoke a couple of weeks ago about when you were kicking and Paul O'Connell would make up your mind for you. He would point towards the post, not give you a chance for any doubt, for any discussion almost, and he wouldn't ask you how you were feeling. It was just point towards the post. Brian, obviously captain of Ireland for a very long time. How did he tend to work things when it came to you and your kicking? Were you told or were you asked sometimes?
No, it's brilliant, I think, in the fact that I suppose Brian is, perception sometimes isn't reality, and the fact that when it came to those decisions, there was a very serious side to him too. But I think it's about knowing your player inside out. And he knew exactly. I think there's a huge, understanding between the two of us, but also the fact that there came a time when he would just point. That was what was happening, and I think we played together an awful amount of time. Sorry, am I there?
You're back, yeah.
Sorry, excuse me. I don't know what happened. So yeah, I think that was absolutely crucial in the makeup of our relationship, because I think in 2000, 3 points were probably different, and a lot of data has emerged, I suppose, in the last few years about certain amount of points needed to beat certain amount of teams. But back then there wasn't that data. It was a lot of times it was 3, 6, 9, and if you got a try, well and good. The kicking game was hugely important. I'd say more out of hand, but also off the ground. But no, he knew me inside out. I think he knew the days I was probably low on confidence, and he knew the days that I was flying. And I think there was sometimes, I don't think it was Brian, some guy who kind of kept a close eye on my game. He just remembers me saying to him, "Don't start the game with a Hail Mary," because I sometimes had a habit of maybe first kick of goal attempting from 54 metres because you think you're brilliant, but that's sometimes not the right thing. It's about building pressure, putting the ball into the 22, getting the forwards to roll and maul, kind of sucking the life out of the opposition. But yeah, I think there was a great, a fantastic relationship there between kicker and captain in terms of kicking that.
Yeah, almost an empathy. Brian, were you conscious of that? Were there certain days where you felt he mightn't have been kicking his absolute best and you might have steered it away from him?
He was pretty much a clutch kicker the whole time. Yes, like everybody's human, and he had the occasional off day. But I think you get to know, the longer you play with someone, the more you get to know their range, how they're feeling, but also playing the sense of where the game was going and the momentum being built, whether it was vitally important to pick 3 points or whether you could go for the jugular a little bit more, where, a kick out maybe on the 5 or 10 meter line, a kick, 10 meters from touch out on the 40. Yeah, you might have a shot at goal and it would be hugely rewarding to get 3, but the thought about potentially missing that and taking the foot off the throat of the opposition, where you could do that by kicking to the corner. I think you understand that as a player, but also a lot, sometimes I'd go up and Rog would make a decision himself and go, yeah, let's go to the corner, let's stay on this. And I'd be like, decision made. And that, I think the comfort in knowing when you're 10 who's very, very comfortable kicking goals, when he goes and says that, that there's no cop out in that. That, right, he wants to get after this because I've seen him kick them a million times. So I think that gives you a comfort and a reassurance as a captain that you're like, right, there's 7 points on the line here as well, because we know he'll kick the conversion. So I think that comes with understanding how the individual ticks but also understanding the flow of a game as to how important 3 points is at any given time.
Sure. One last, it's a short question, and it probably potentially has a very long answer. So, I understand that there's a nuanced answer, and I'm going to ask for a more blunt kind of response. If you two look back on your Ireland careers, which were in tandem for a huge portion of them, and if you were having a quiet drink together or a quiet chat, Ronan, do you look back as a pair, do you suspect, and think, we didn't do everything we wanted to achieve, but we were happy enough? Or is it maybe more towards the spectrum of regret and there was more talent in the team and you could have done more? How do you almost categorize what you two did together in an Irish jersey?
Do you want to go, Brian?
Well, I don't know whether was that to you, Raj, but I'll take it.
Okay,
first.
No,
I'll take it. A little bit of column A, a little column B, right? First of all, I think the timing of our being brought into the international squad initially for me, first in '98 and then captain '99, Raj captain 2000. The team and the mentality of our squad at the time was otherworldly than where it is now, and I think sometimes people lose sight of that. So from where we went then in the doldrums of the 90s through to achieving a Grand Slam in 2009 and leaving definitely one more behind us in 2007, I think you take huge satisfaction that we were able to turn it around. That said, you look back on how you could have changed things and how you could have copped on a little bit earlier and how you could have been a little bit more professional, certainly from my point of view. And would that have given us a better opportunity of being more successful? Maybe. But it was of a very different time. We were still getting used to becoming professionals. We were playing with lots of guys that had been amateurs before, and their mentality was vastly different to those that have only ever been professionals. And I think that was a seminal moment, that when those players that had played amateur rugby then retired, I think the level of professionalism kicked on to a completely different level. And that's no slur on them. That's just a natural instinct that they tasted one type of international sport or provincial rugby, and then they were being paid to do something similar, and it's a very difficult mentality switch to just forget your previous life and treat yourself in a new one. So I think when things did change a little bit for me, probably 2005, 2006, and still continue to make some errors, but I feel as though we did well, but we had more in us, and I still look back with satisfaction. One Grand Slam, won Six Nations, multiple Triple Crowns, and it's a reasonable outcome from 15 years, but it could have been better too.
Okay, Raj, how do you see it before we move on?
Yeah, I think the big thing that gnaws at me would be World Cups. I just think that really dissatisfies me, just the opportunity. And well, as Brian said, in 2003, there was never any talk of going down there to win. That was the mentality. And it probably, with a little bit of hindsight, if we beat Australia in the final pool game, I think we played Scotland in that quarter final. So everything could have really changed then. 2007, I wouldn't change anything about the preparation. Emptied the tank, gave it everything. I think everyone in the squad did.
You talking about the preparation from 2007?
In terms of, individual preparation, in terms of what I gave to it, obviously in terms of getting the periodization of peaking, I don't have any answers for that. I just knew that time in Spala, when we went there for that training camp, as individuals, we were all in peak condition. But after that, I have lots of question marks in my head.
I wasn't in peak condition. I think I dropped the ball. You know, I had a big period of being away from the game from the last Six Nations game, and there's a huge focus on being enormous, and boy, did I get enormous. You know, I came back from my summer holidays over 100 kg, and I think that was a real error on my behalf. And I kind of played scared in the World Cup. I played okay, kind of individually. I had a couple of big moments and scored some important tries, but I think I look back on that with big regret that I didn't get my act together a lot earlier in the year and realize what an opportunity it was, because that was a Grand Slam we should have won in 2007, and we had the capabilities of definitely getting to a semi-final that year. And alas, I think individually I got it wrong, but I think collectively we got the build up to that completely wrong, where that huge focus of, you know, getting big and getting strong and being able to deal with the power of France and Argentina took over, and it changed our psyche, and we didn't become rugby players, we were weightlifters. And I think that's where we made a huge error. So I think it was a combination of my own mistakes that World Cup, but also as a collective that we didn't get our regime right, and we didn't give ourselves a fighting chance to go into it.
Yeah, I suppose, mine would be different then, in the fact that I suppose from that, getting my body right, I felt the body was right. But then when it came to rugby, because I think we cared so much about a performance, week one, we didn't perform, tried to push it harder Monday to Friday. I think come Saturday, for a number of weeks, we were empty on game day. There was nothing to find when the pressure came on, when we looked to find another gear, dead in our feet. I can remember, I think it's an image that will stay with all of us, when we tried to defend the Argentina 8-9-14, and we could never succeed in training. And then it kind of just, one of the first plays of the game, Argentina score off it. It was just like, oh my God, is this happening?
But I think we left training not fully understanding what we needed to do, which is something you just can't afford to do. Whereas, you know, the second team ran in that 8-9. It was just an 8-9-14, and they got us a couple of times, and it was almost like it'll be okay, we'll be fine on the day itself. And then they scored immediately themselves in the quarterfinal. And you look back on that in particular and go, how did we not resolve it there and then? Because it felt as though we were still scratching our heads coming off that training park.
Yeah, I think there was. I think we probably maybe had the structure right, but the execution of defending it didn't go well. And then, as you said, doubt and fear came in, and when there was so many different opinions, but we didn't probably nail the solution there and then. But yeah, I think going back to Joe's point, I think the World Cups were the big disappointment for me. Other than that, I think the Six Nations were, like Brian said, we started off from a low base, and got there, and you're ploughing that furrow. And but I think now that you're retired, it's the memories of the people you play with, as opposed to, I suppose, the medals.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the Ball 2019 IMRO Radio Awards Sports Programme of the Year.
Salah takes the shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season.
Who will see their dreams turn into reality? Whose names will be etched in history forever?
Offtheball.com, best online publisher at the 2019 Spider Awards.
A big breaking story on offtheball.com for you this morning. We have the very latest on the Mayo leaks. We now know what went on in that secretive Mayo County Board meeting.
2019 Irish Sponsorship Awards Best Radio Sponsorship, OTB Super Value GAA Roadshows.
Well, when she comes back, get your arse back here, he said. Starr is out sitting on the swing and Darren O'Sullivan is pushing him.
OTB Sports Radio, live online 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM.
And you are very welcome back to OTB AM. If you've just joined us, you've missed a good half-hour chat between Brian O'Driscoll, Ronan O'Gara and Joe Malloy about their respective careers. Well, more about the two lads' careers, obviously, than Joe's, but you get my drift. And that's available for download on all of our podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, indeed. The best place to get them these days is on the Go Loud app, or indeed on offtheball.com. Owen Sheehan, good morning to you. How are you doing this fine Wednesday morning?
Very, very well,
Is it Wednesday?
actually, Jer. I think so. Just consulting the top right of my computer there. Yes, it is indeed Wednesday. Happy Wednesday.
And I made a schoolboy error last night. I finished Better Call Saul up to the point where it's live now, and I'm going to have to wait for the final 2 episodes. I can't believe I've done that. It's really tactically, it's naive. It's the type of tactical decision that, you know, we've seen from some Ireland managers in the past, and we've slaughtered them for it. But I realise I've let the team down here, and I'd like to apologise to everybody. I had a shocker, basically.
Does it feel like 2006 all over again?
I mean, it's
having to wait.
It's not a very good feeling. I'm going to have to tell you, not a very good feeling. Where it rolls on, and it's a trailer for another program. What is this? Why is that happening?
I'd imagine you're probably going to forget about things that happen between now and next week. Like you will be so conditioned into putting this all back to back and packing it all very quickly that the information is just thrown at you, and then all of a sudden you got a full week. You might actually need a previously on the show next week. Like that's probably going to be your longest gap without the TV show with these next 6 days.
Yeah, no, totally. That's a good idea. Or you could watch it back last week's episode and just let it roll. You know, key it up or watch the last 10 minutes so you get that dopamine hit of I didn't even have to wait. That's perfect. The reason I'm talking about this is because Better Call Saul, our recap, is coming back for you tomorrow's show. Today's show, we have Dermot Kennedy talking to us in our Culture Club in association with Now TV. Before we get to all that, though, there are a few things that we need to sort out straight off the bat here, Owen. As a Kerry man, how do you feel about Cork having a Mount Rushmore that may well just be, you know, a few meters higher than Kerry's Mount Rushmore?
I thought you were going to stop that sentence after the word Mount Rushmore initially. How do you feel about Cork having a Mount Rushmore at all? It's been a very educational experience for me going back and looking back through some of the supposed greatness of the county of Cork over the past few hours and last night and the last couple of days, really. Like you get brought up on a diet of being told that the single best thing to come out of Cork is the road to Killarney. So it is quite surprising when you see that they actually have fairly impressive sports people across a range of codes. My new favourite hobby, of course, you know, just absolutely delighted to be here this morning, to be able to say nice things about Cork and to pay them the respect that the county deserves.
It's the coronavirus dividend that the county of Cork has been waiting for. Owen Sheehan to say nice things about them. That was one of the unintended consequences of this virus. Has been nice neighbourly love.
Yeah, it sure has. Like, I mean, obviously that there is a good case to be made that some of the great Cork people perhaps hadn't even been associated with Cork. Like, I just going back to some of the historical figures from Cork. It's really a low point for me when I thought the great Pat O'Callaghan, the hammer thrower, was a Tipperary man, and discovered over the last 24 hours that actually, no, I was wrong. He's a Cork man, as if the county actually needed any more reason to give the sense of arrogance. Like, it's annoying when a certain bunch of people are arrogant and in your face about it and are so patriotic about their county. That is annoying on its own. But then when they actually have decent reason and you actually can't really argue against certain things, it makes it all the more frustrating, because the arrogance goes nowhere. It doesn't actually lead to any sort of, I'm talking about within supporters now, it doesn't lead to any great sense of humility, which is all well and good. But like, if somebody is from Cork, they'll probably tell you about it. They will have the sense of Corkness, which is, of course, like the right side of arrogance, or confidence in the right side of arrogance. Maybe that's why there is a number of Mount Rushmores that could be made for Cork, but it's certainly the reason why we're here this morning, to bask in the achievements, let's put it that way, of Cork people.
What about Rena Buckley and Breach Corkery? Where do they come?
Yeah. Where did they come? Like, I haven't really put together, like, so here's what I'm thinking. So we've got Colm Boohig on later on to go through his Cork Mount Rushmore, and he's going to have the casting vote on all of this. So for me, there's two bankers, Roy Keane and Sonia O'Sullivan, and then there's about 6 people then that I would have in consideration for the remaining 2 slots. And Rena Buckley and Breach Corkery are 2 of them. Simple as that. 18 All-Ireland medals. Insanity that is a statistic. That 36 All-Ireland medals between 2 people, it is out of this world. And the automatic consideration you make is Jimmy Barry Murphy, or beyond that, Jack Lynch and Christy Ring when it comes to Cork GAA. But is it not a situation where we should be considering Rena Buckley and Breach Corkery on the same level as them, if not ahead of them? Now, granted, Christy Ring brings all this greatness and his lore and the legacy. He is the man of legacy when it comes to hurling in general, not just Cork GAA. But the actual achievements of individuals across two codes, let us not forget that. Like, Jimmy Barry Murphy is in contention here because he's got his All-Ireland in football, and obviously an unbelievable achievement. And women's football is obviously at a different place to men's football. It's a few decades behind, unfortunately, but still, it's 18, and it's not like there hasn't been a dominant county in, say, women's football in the past. Like, didn't Kerry win like seven, was it 10 in a row actually? They won. Like, that's a statistic I should have at the top of my hand. But it's not like they had this complete runaway train where they had monopoly on women's football. It certainly seemed like that, but actually the reason why it seemed like that was because we were witnessing one of the great sports teams that Ireland has ever seen. And beside that, you had a camogie team, which was also the best camogie team of its era, and just accumulating 18 in total for each of them is a ridiculous achievement, Ger. And like, they have to be up there with Christy Ring and JBM for me in this consideration. And then there's only two other people I would be considering for those two spots. It's Dennis Irwin and Ronan O'Gara. And I'm going to try my best when we have these discussions to not get lulled into a sense of, oh, let's spread it out amongst the sports. If it needs to be Roy and Sonia and Rena and Breach, then so be it, as the morning wages on. We're not going to just perhaps give it to one of them, but maybe we will get lulled into the sense of actually spreading it around amongst sports, because it is hard to ignore someone like Ronan O'Gara, for example.
It is hard to ignore Ronan O'Gara, especially because you know that he'd be texting you after the show going, what the hell? But Dennis Irwin, I mean, Dennis Irwin's career is an all-time great Irish football career. It gets overshadowed because there is another Cork man in the team. But if Dennis Irwin was from any other county in Ireland, he would be a shoo-in for the number of titles that he won, for the fact that he was able to keep his place in the team. Bear in mind, this was the best team in world football for a period of time, and he was Mr. Dependable according to the manager. And like, he's in Ireland's all-time greatest team, and you can pick him at left back, you can pick him at right back, and I'm saying he's in my all-time Ireland great team. So, and again, football is the sport that is played globally, that every kid at some point or other sees a round ball.
Ger has just frozen there. We'll try and re-establish his connection in just a moment. We might give him a call back. In the meantime, I'm going to run through what's on offtheball.com. Make sure to log on for all the news throughout the day. We've got Kevin Kilban leading the way this morning on offtheball.com. Kilban, well, it's a photograph of Kevin Kilban. Kilban explaining hurling to Hullet is an incredibly surreal moment. This was the BBC's Mark Chapman, who was on the line last night with Joe. Fantastic chat, which you can get back now on youtube.com/offtheball. Elsewhere on offtheball.com today, please celebrate with me. This is Neil Mellor on Stephen Gerrard, Olympiacos goal. 15 years, of course, over the next couple of weeks since Istanbul, since Liverpool's incredible run to winning the Champions League. Next on offtheball.com, we have Morientes pulls out his passport, Neil Mellor on LFC in Istanbul, and Mercedes Formula One making breathing devices to help fight against COVID-19. One of the good news stories, and a sporting organisation that is certainly doing good work over the last couple of days, and worrying news as well. Spurs and England legend Jimmy Greaves admitted to hospital. Jerry, you're back.
I am sorry. I was making the point about Dennis Irwin being good at football. The other thing that everybody does is they run fast, and Dermot O'Rourke was an Irish sprinter who made it to elite level at a world level. Finished fourth in the World Championships, won an indoor 60-meter sprint title. Like, that would be, again, straight onto the Mount Rushmore in any other county, with the exception maybe of Dublin. But it doesn't even get mentioned. Hasn't once come up in conversation. I haven't seen anybody texting about Dermot. I think Dermot is a superstar that we underrate.
They just come in there. I wonder if Dermot O'Rourke and Dennis Irwin are both going to suffer from the same implicit bias over the next few hours, that because Roy Keane and Sonia O'Sullivan exist, we automatically just don't consider the next person up in that field. So obviously the next person up in athletics is Dermot, and the next person up in football is obviously Dennis Irwin. And maybe there is a case to be made that is that the four of them could be the Mount Rushmore. But like, I seriously would be considering Irwin ahead of Rog, ahead of Christy Ring, ahead of JBM as well, ahead of Rena and Breach, like because of what you say, like if you the criteria why Roy Keane is an absolute banker is because he was at the very top of his game in a game that was truly worldwide, that was truly global. But Dennis Irwin was of a fairly similar ilk. Like you look at the 10-year awards they did for the Premier League, what was it, 2002, 2003, after they'd done 10 seasons, like Dennis Irwin makes that team. Like it's Henry, it's Canton, it's Pires, it's Vieira, it's Desai, Stam, and it's Dennis Irwin. This is the level we're talking about here. This is not some sort of cult Irish hero. The furthest thing from it, and I know nobody needs us to tell him that this morning. 7 Premier League titles, twice in the PFA Team of the Year. This is a real contender, and the more you talk about it, the more you're like, you can't leave him out.
Yeah, I wonder if Duffer make the Dublin one. I'm not sure, but certainly he's in the conversation for it on the basis of having won a Premier League with Chelsea. Let's get to some of the comments here, right? Cian Fahey says, Roy, Rog, whoever. Sue Murphy from Off the Ball says, we're essentially just giving Colm Boohig the opportunity to go on about Cork forever. I mean, we have to listen to that shite in the office. We shouldn't inflict it on the public. Well, this is kind of where the idea comes from, Sue. And Valerie Mackay has been in touch to say Rena Buckley for sure. So she's picking Rena. She obviously would have played with Rena and Breach. And, I think you were making the case pretty strongly. One or both of them certainly is deserving of a place on the mountain. Jamie Wall says Roy, Rog, Sonia and Jack Lynch. I didn't see Jack Lynch play, but his achievement is fairly spectacular as well. Were his all sequential? Was there a period of his that were all in a row? So he won an All-Ireland every year for a number of years? Anthea, go on.
No, I'll certainly check that up while you're going on there.
Rob says, Dr. Pat, JBM, blessed be his holy name. Anthony O'Callaghan says Roy, Sonia, Irwin and Christy. Interesting, Jamie Wall didn't put Christy Ring on his. Patrick Healy says, this could run for weeks due to the fact we've produced the greatest sportsmen and sportswomen on the island of Ireland for decades. As for the rest, they don't really matter. Corking a boo. See, that's exactly the point you're making. And I do feel like this could have been a week-long. The Cork episode could actually be something that we do week-long where, somebody comes and makes the case. I think you have to have Roy Keane on this, right? I don't think that there's any ifs, ands or buts about that. I think the same about Sonia because she dominated at middle distance for so long in the world and wins, how many Olympic silver medals do we have on the track in the modern era? I can't think of any else. We obviously have Wayne McCullough has a silver. There's not a whole heap of them knocking about. So that's that level she's at. And after that, you could literally debate this back and forth for a week. Tom O'Donoghue says we're going to need a bigger mountain. That's the joy of this, is that you only have room for the 4. Jimmy Barry Murphy, Christy Ring, Billy Morgan, and Kildare legend Larry Tompkins, says Fergal Doyle. I put Billy Morgan in a conversation. I think Billy Morgan has that, is still involved in Cork GAA at a very high level, like coaching Sigerson teams, and is still influential at a point where most other people of that vintage have gone, right, my bit is done here. But, he's still given brilliant post-match interviews. He gave one to Oisin at the end of a Sigerson game this year. He was in goals when they were winning All Irelands in the 70s. That's 5 decades of service to Cork GAA, which includes going toe to toe with the Meath team. And that Meath team would have been an all-time great team if they hadn't run into that Cork team. If that Meath team had come up against the dregs of the Kerry team, they would have hammered them year in, year out. But that Cork team went toe to toe with them and prevented them from winning 4 All Irelands or 5 All Irelands when actually they were probably good enough to do so. So I think, that's Billy Morgan's team. Obviously, he has a very strong Kildare influence. And maybe Larry Tompkins should be on this.
I think that's a stretch. I think that, unfortunately, great teams, obviously, but you're birthed into greatness, people will say, because you're from Cork, but you're also birthed into a very strong competition to get onto the Mount Rushmore. And it's far too strong for any football-only person from Cork to make it. Unfortunately, that's the case. And yes, it is.
Is it? Just
it is.
No, hang on. No, wait. Think about this. So this goes back to my argument about why Tyrone's achievements in the noughties are superior to those of Kerry. And I know immediately your defence mechanism, your hackles rise. But doing something for the first time in a long time, ending a famine, being the best player on the team, carrying the team the way Larry Tompkins did, that deserves consideration. He wrestles that team to All-Ireland glory. that absolutely deserves consideration for a place on a Mount Rushmore. Everybody else is winning stuff. Like the hurlers are birthed into a tradition where they expect to win. Those footballers in Cork do not expect to win.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I think that if you're from Cork, you expect to win, full stop, or you expect like you definitely have maybe an air of naive arrogance about you in certain eras. Like, I mean, if you want to go back through that era of the 2000s, like Cork not winning an All-Ireland in that year, in that decade is probably criminal, because I would have thought prior to the last Mayo team, they were on course to be one of the best teams to not win an All-Ireland until, of course, 2010. So maybe that does feed into your idea that perhaps they didn't expect to win, considering they didn't manage to get over the line in the noughties at all. But I just don't think so. Like, I think if it's another county, of course, like with the exception of maybe Dublin and Kerry and maybe Galway, like I just don't think that those football achievements alone are enough to get you anywhere near this Mount Rushmore, actually. I think even if there was a second Mount Rushmore, you actually would not make it with those football-only achievements. That being said,
I think that's wrong. I think we're underestimating the importance of somebody like Tompkins. So, for example, if Larry Tompkins had done what he did for Galway and ended their famine, if he was the main player on the team that wins in '98, he's straight on, right? So that '98 team, that Galway '98 team, are going to have one, if not two, people on Galway's Mount Rushmore, right?
I don't know.
One.
Yeah, okay, I would assume so.
Yeah, so I think that's we're underestimating the importance of Larry Tompkins and Cork GA.
No, I think you're underestimating the amazing depth that Cork has. If you're like, you can't just compare Cork with Galway. Like, it's like, as much as it pains me to say it, these are vastly different things. Cork is streets ahead of a lot of other people when it comes to this. Like, the only county really is Dublin that we will have any similar sort of conversation about this. Galway, a few rungs below Cork, without question. Cork and Dublin are streets ahead of everybody else when it comes to the wealth of talent that they've had. Of course, this is as a result of population. Cork people will tell you it's something in their blood, but no, it's because of population. It's because you got a bloody big city. You got a lot of people. Chances are one of those people are going to be generational talents. Well done to you. But no, like, I just think that you Google, although if you Google Cork's greatest sports people, the fourth result is Graham Canty. So maybe Google is telling me that there should be a footballer only on this.
Well, hang on, sorry. We haven't mentioned the rowers. They haven't come in once.
Good point. Good point.
I completely forgotten. We haven't mentioned the rowers. And I was like, oh, Olympic silver medals. Who else has one from? I was thinking of athletics. So yeah, look, wow.
Is it too soon?
That's our excuse for overlooking them so far in the conversation, and to everybody who has been getting in touch with us on Twitter. So where are the rowers? And Vincent O'Brien was one of John Duggan's shouts from for his influence on horse racing, not even mentioned in dispatches apart from by John Duggan. Right here, get rid of Mount Rushmore, US propaganda, change it to Shandon's Four Faces. Richard Barry says Pat O'Callaghan, first Irish athlete to win a medal under the Irish flag, 2 gold medalist hammer thrower, Sonia, Roy Keane, Breach Corkery. Can we have more? It's criminal to leave out Ring, O'Gara, Irwin, Buckley, Heffernan, Roy Ring, Sonia, Pat O'Callaghan, double Olympic gold medal. And then this one, the conversation here was Mick Foley from the Sunday Times saying there's planning for 4 Mount Rushmores, one overlooking the city, one near Youghal, above in Mallow, and one back around Barley Cove near Mizzen. And there'll be a ferocious bun fight to fill those 16 places. You could have 4. You could definitely have 4. Serena Buckley says Sarah Hegarty, name a more decorated athlete in the country. Obviously, Rena and Breach, fairly similarly decorated. Jimmy Barry Murphy, Roy Keane, Christy Ring, and surely Dave Barry. Dave Barry, not mentioned yet. 2 All-Irelands, a league title with Cork City, and burst the onion bag against Bayern Munich. Legend. See, Dave Barry, somebody has to get on for that crossover from, I can do many things. I think that's, there's a shout to have Dave Barry involved. Because it feeds into your soccer and GAA.
Yeah, the I can do many things. The dual code thing is a theme in Cork, but actually going from inside a GA to outside a GA actually isn't as common as you might think. So it's not the worst shot. It's just that there are so many great people here who you actually just can't even consider. Like, so many achievements that would be a banker in any other county, but in Cork's situation, they don't even come close. They don't even get into the second Mount Rushmore, as I said. So that accounts for someone like Dave Barry, I'm afraid.
087 918 180 is the number to WhatsApp us your views on this. I'm going to bring you through the sports news. The future of Robbie Keane within the FAI is expected to be resolved in the coming days. We're hearing the next 48 hours at least. Keane was obviously a senior coach under Mick McCarthy, but the Republic of Ireland's record goal scorer does not form part of new manager Stephen Kenny's backroom team. Obviously, Keith Andrews and Damien Duff are there. Robbie Keane, though, has 2 years left on his current deal, and an amicable departure is seen as the most likely option. Do hope it is going to be amicable. Spurs have reminded their players of the need for social distancing during the coronavirus pandemic after Davinson Sanchez and Ryan Sessegnon were both pictured running side by side in a London park. Jose Mourinho also appeared to be conducting a session with Ndombele in a different park at a different time. Spurs say their record goal scorer Jimmy Greaves is being treated in hospital. They say they're in touch with the striker's family and will be providing further updates. He is 80. He also obviously played for Chelsea and West Ham, and he suffered a severe stroke in May 2015. In cycling, the Tour de France looks set to have an August finish this year, they hope. Mayors of towns where stage finishes have been approached by race organisers about the proposal, and under the proposals, the Tour would start on the 25th of July. It will be hot on the 25th of July and will finish in Paris on August the 16th. In motorsport, the Canadian Grand Prix, the 9th race of the 2020 season to be postponed because of the pandemic. The season is now slated to start with the French Grand Prix on the 28th of June. We'll see if that happens. And Formula One chief Chase Carey is adamant that the season will visit Montreal at some point later in the calendar. So here's what's coming up on the show. Sports page is coming your way. Mount Rushmore from Colm Boohig officially at 8:30 this morning. OTB Culture Club is back. It's week 2 of it. This week it is Dermot Kennedy. It's in association with Now TV. He's picked Gladiator, which is available for download and to watch and stream on Now TV. And then Lockdown Lowdown today features some sporting highlights and also the worst pour of Guinness that you're ever going to see from a member of Team OTB. It is time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
Owen has already taken you through offtheball.com, so I'll very briefly remind you of what is up on offtheball.com at the moment. And the lead story there is Kilban explaining hurling to Hullet is an incredibly surreal moment. Mark Chapman from, well, I actually know more from the NFL coverage than Match of the Day. You'll all know him as BBC's Match of the Day guy. A great guy, really comes across in this interview exactly like he comes across on TV. Somebody who's just enthusiastic about his gig and about sport generally. And here he is talking about Kilban, explaining to Ruth Hullet about hurling. In rugby, there was a fantastic relationship there between kicker and captain. That's Ronan O'Gara talking about his relationship with Brian O'Driscoll. And please celebrate with me. Neil Mellor was on last night talking about the Champions League. We'll play a clip from this a little bit later on. Obviously, he, sets up the goal. Is that how we phrase that on? I'm not sure, but certainly he's around when Stevie G smacks that ball in against Olympiacos.
The Irish Independent this morning, Jared, leads with a photograph of James Sugrue on the back of the newspaper. He's going to have to wait to make his Masters bow. It's going to be pushed back until November at least. So, of course, he, after winning the Amateur Open last year, he got the invite. So he's going to have to wait until later this year to get teeing off in Augusta. Angry Keane in showdown with FAI over his future role. This is Aidan Fitzmaurice writing about the crunch talks that are probably going to happen between Robbie Keane and the FAI over the next 48 hours. And Donncha Ball writing this morning that the AFL is to curtail recruitment of Irish players as COVID-19 bites. So, of course, foreign recruitment probably seen as a luxury at this point in Australia. Possibly more worrying than that is like what happens to players on the lower end of the wage scale in Australia. Can they continue to play? Will clubs be able to afford it? I think the answers will probably become clear over the next few weeks and months. But the AFL, like every sporting organisation at the moment, counting pennies.
In the Examiner this morning, Prenti GAA has chance to halt runaway train of inter-county spending. Obviously, there's going to be no inter-county spending at the moment, and certainly it's going to be interesting to see how quickly counties go back to spending the money that they were spending on backroom teams and travel and all the preparation costs that they were into it. Money is the main story there as well. Pandemic may cost Premier League at least £1 billion sterling, and FIFA moves to approve extension of contracts until seasons finish. This is going to be very interesting. The whole point of the Bosman ruling was that football needs to act like a business and needs to obey the rules of business. All of a sudden, they're unilaterally extending contracts. If the players decide they don't want this to happen, then it won't happen. So they're saying that they would like it to happen. We'll wait and see. All-Ireland finals could be played in October or November. I think this is a perfectly legitimate thing to be doing, is to have these plans in place. And I mean, we've spoken a bit about this at the very start, Owen. the whole notion of us finishing in September. We don't need to finish in September. We just need, and as soon as possible, when it's safe to do so, we need to get back to some kind of sense of these games will happen. This is how we gather. This is how we celebrate life. These are important moments. That to be slaves to a calendar and a date and a time frame and say, no, it's gone, it doesn't make that much sense to me. In a way, I don't fully understand exactly why the RNA didn't just say, we're going to play the British Open at some point this year. We'll come back to you in a couple of months' time when we see how the calendar is looking. Anyway, Galway GAHE's braced for €1 million shortfall due to COVID-19. So money is the main story in the Examiner this morning.
The Irish Times today leads with Premier League chief claims top flight clubs could go bust. This is Richard Masters talking about the fact that obviously a few Premier League clubs have put their staff on furlough, referring to the fact that it might actually be more necessary than you think because these Premier League clubs are going to hit the rocks soon. There is a possibility that they could hit the rocks soon. Of course, that doesn't include the likes of Liverpool, but perhaps the likes of Bournemouth. It might be more necessary than some of us think. Spain preparing protocol for return to action. Meanwhile, so this is a theme we've seen over the last couple of days. Bundesliga return to training with social distancing being practiced with 4 or 5 people on the pitch at one time over the last couple of days. Spain now preparing to get back on the pitch. Of course, we had that report in the London Independent last week that the Premier League are considering World Cup style camps in order to try and make something similar happen. So that's 3 different leagues who are, of course, moving in the direction to try and get football back up and running behind closed doors. It's interesting to see when it happens. You've got 3 different countries who actually are moving at very different rates, and you've got the idea of potentially completing a Champions League. The year is out. Whether or not that'll happen, I think, is a big question mark. Then World Cup, highly unlikely to be moved from Qatar. At least it's being said. That's the best thing about these stories whenever they come out. When there's allegations of bribery around giving the World Cup, it's like, nah, it's grand. This is commonplace. We actually don't need to look into this. We actually don't need to move to the World Cup anywhere else. It is totally fine. That was a bygone era. And as you mentioned there already, Ger, extended contracts to facilitate longer season.
The Times of London, Mourinho is warned over park training. Spurs manager and players flout lockdown rules. The picture's a little bit misleading because it's Mourinho walking, holding a stopwatch. Now, he is just with Ndombele. I don't know. There's a picture of him and some people in the background. They might just be hangers-on. I don't know what that is. The story that they put out is that he was just with Ndombele, and so therefore this isn't breaching too much of the lockdown rules. It's not like he was training 4 players, even though 2 of the other Spurs players do appear to have been working out together. Now, who knows? Maybe those 2 Spurs players happen to live with each other. It's unlikely that they're flatmates or, mock Tudor mansion mates, however it may be. But maybe they are, I mean, I don't know the living arrangements. They're not that unlikely that 2 20-somethings who are very rich decide that they're going to have a bachelor lifestyle living together, is it?
No, I would be surprised though. They were also spotted in the same park as Mourinho and Ndombele, so it's not an outrageous suggestion to make that they were together. But it has been said that they were separate. Sessegnon and Davinson Sanchez were separate to the 1v1 session. If you have that amount of money, is there not a situation where you can actually just call over to Tanguy Ndombele's house, or can Ndombele call over to Jose's house, and they could do it secretly? If you're going to mess the rules up, if you're going to break the rules, why would you do it in such a common place where clearly there is going to be photographs taken of you?
Yeah, at the Spurs training ground, which I presume is empty. And I mean, I'd say he probably could get keys if he wanted to. It does seem a bit strange. MP's fury over furlough use. This is, they've dug out another MP who is unhappy with the fact that, just trying to find it, Julian Knight, the DCMS committee chairman, issued a withering response last night in a media release that perhaps provocatively also included a copy of Master's letter. So it's like, this is politicians. The death toll in England yesterday was the equivalent of 2 airplanes. And that is the only story that matters in the UK at the moment. This whole thing about some clubs using a government scheme, which is designed to save businesses, versus other clubs not using it, has been just this very strange sideshow to the main story, which has been the mishandling of the entire crisis by the British government. And this row about football is actually a really easy distraction for the politicians, as opposed to talking about the main thing. So I don't know. And then Ascot behind closed doors. That's the Queen apparently has said, yeah, Ascot behind closed doors is a good idea, rather than not having it at all. So we might have some racing to look forward to sooner rather than later.
The back page of the Irish Daily Star leads with the quotes from Richard Masters. Doomed is the headline. Premier League Supremo fears €1 billion wipeout, and the English FA chief warns stricken clubs face oblivion.
So sorry, which one did you do? You did the Mail?
I just did the Star.
You just did the Star.
I
okay, so
skipped ahead.
I think, yeah. So will I do the Mail next? Mourinho's antisocial training. Spurs boss and players break rules. Still on track for classics. That's the story we just talked about, the Queen being on side. And Ireland's athletes won't fall through the cracks. Ireland's elite athletes will not be allowed to fall through the cracks as they deal with COVID-19 restrictions that have shut down Irish sport. That's the vow of Liam Harbison, the director of the Irish Sport Institute, the elite facility which is central to the preparation of Ireland's Olympic hopefuls. So they obviously have all their support networks in place to try and support the Irish athletes. And they're going to need them, because obviously it's going to be very difficult for anybody to come through this. But imagine if your job was to be an elite athlete at the end of this, when the ennui grips and the fear of the existential crisis that is gripping society. You're like, yeah, I've got to go and run a race now. It's going to be tricky enough for some people to match. So, all right, what's next?
The Daily Telegraph this morning leads with clubs and leagues may go under in virus crisis. FA chairman gives shock warning for games future. TV could seek rebate even if top flight games are played. And as you said there, Queen backs plan for Royal Ascot to go ahead behind closed doors. And Levy could let Spurs staff work on his private estate is the latest from Tottenham Hotspur. That doesn't involve Jose Mourinho and Tanguy Ndombele doing one-to-one sessions.
Okay. And just in terms of the order here, you've just done the Telegraph, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that, Owen. And what should I do next if anybody wants to?
While you're looking for your newspapers there, I'm sure we've got them all rounded up. Just the Irish News this morning. Take your pick. WBO top-ranked Conlon has no shortage of options for world featherweight title shot, and Antrim players and officials donate $6,000 to food banks, which is a great story there this morning. Inside the Irish News sports section, then Paul Kelly looks back at the key contributors and contributions to Armagh football over the past 10 years, perhaps something of a 10-year Mount Rushmore from the Irish News on Armagh greats. Jemmy Clark there, photographed on the back of the Irish News sports section.
That's just to tab of the morning to you. We don't normally do the front pages, but the front page of the Irish Daily Star this morning, they obviously have a fitness pull-out, and they've got pictures of Damien Duff and Stephen Kenny. But the headline is the most important thing. Lockdown extended. Go out your back in tan. Checkpoints plan to stop holidaymakers. Gardaí get extra powers. 36 die in sad day. But the order is, get out your back in tan. Don't be congregating anywhere where there might be other people. Don't be going to holiday homes. Oh, and I know you obviously have a couple of mansions down in Kerry that you would consider holiday homes as opposed to your main residence, and they're going to be lying idle this weekend.
Well, the whole holiday, there seems to be a lot of people shocked at the whole holiday homes thing, and like it does feel very. If you felt it was 2006 watching a television show and having to wait next week for the episode, they certainly felt 2006 talking about holiday homes again. But then there were some people who were totally shocked by it. It's not actually that shocking if some people have them and they're not paying for a house in Dublin, for example. A home and a holiday home in a different part of Ireland may actually be cheaper than one house in Dublin. Who knows? But yeah, it's mad that where the boom had returned to the point where holiday homes were the norm again.
0879 180 180 is the number on WhatsApp this morning. You can leave us a comment wherever you are watching this on your streams. It is 8:34. We're getting into the Cork Mount Rushmore next here on OTB AM with Colm Boohig. But earlier we brought you some of our Brian O'Driscoll and Ron O'Gara special from last night's show. You can listen back to the full chat if you subscribe to Rugby on OTB. It's the OTB Podcast Network. You can watch it back on our YouTube channel. Here they are talking about Stephen Kenny's appointment as Irish manager. Have a look.
Yeah, I think it's a more challenging situation that Stephen Kenny finds himself in, because reputation and respect does count for a lot, particularly when you come into a huge role like Irish head coach or Irish manager is. And, you know, there'll be some players that come into that environment that won't know a huge amount other than what he's achieved in League of Ireland, you know, underage. But he will probably have to prove himself a little bit more, and that does happen in the first few weeks of getting a credibility, getting players on side, saying the right thing, and keeping people excited about the prospect of what's coming down the line. And from my point of view, with new coaches, I suppose we had a similar situation with Michael Cheika. He'd come from Randwick, pretty much unknown. And we took a real chance on him. And he was in the fortunate position that we were in a bad spot. We'd gone through, he was our fourth coach in 4 years, and we were a bit of a shambles. So he came in at close to rock bottom of where we were as a side. And so he started saying some things that we could react to, and he started changing the mentality from day one and kind of deconstructing us to reconstruct. And I think that's exactly the sort of coach that we needed. But I must say, over the course of, he built that credibility. I remember him filling me with confidence. About 6 months in, he said, what we're going to do is we're going to win the Magners League as it was in year 2, and we're going to win Europe in year 3. And he was adamant about this. And we managed to get to the semi-final of Europe out of nowhere and got beaten by a much better Munster team that year. But I think what that did was it realised that if we can get there on the basis of his quality coaching with a side that's a fraction of the potential that we could put together in another side, well, we got a chance here. So I think the unknown coaches, the coaches that haven't been there and done it previously, they do have their work cut out. And they've got to start delivering pretty quickly, because players can smell bullshit.
Yeah, players can smell bullshit. That's Brian O'Driscoll talking about the accession of Stephen Kenny to the main role. Now, let's talk about the main news story of this or any other day. It is, who are Cork's greatest sports people? And the greatest Cork man in our office is none other than Colm Boohig, whose job it is to tell us who he is going to put on Cork's sporting Mount Rushmore. Colm, good morning to you.
Lads, how are you?
Nathan Murphy said he didn't sleep the night before he came on here and ballsed up the Mayo selection. So, how are you doing, Colm?
Well, sir, it goes like this. I got a call from our beloved OTB AM producer, Tommy Rooney, the other day, asking me to be the representative for Cork Mount Rushmore. I accepted dutifully. I was honoured. It wasn't just the fact that I'm the only Cork person and off the ball at all. So I took up that chance. And when the phone call ended, pleasant phone call, 10 seconds later, I had my 4 choices. And those 4 choices have not left my head since then. And they will not be removed. In fact, they are already being carved into Cork Mount Rushmore on the top of Patrick's Hill in Cork City to overlook the whole Cork. My 4
to
names,
look down,
right?
To look down. Well, give us your first 3, right? Well, okay. How about me and Owen try and predict exactly who you're going to go for? You're going to go for Roy Keane. You're going to go for Sonia Sullivan. You're going to go for a start.
This is outrageous. This is outrageous. Right.
Who are you going to?
Not necessarily.
Who are you going to go for? You're going to go for. I think you might go for Dennis Irwin because you're a Man United fan.
Dennis Irwin is 100% making an appearance.
No, that's what people think I will do. So I won't do that.
Well,
right?
exactly. That's what. So your second, your double bluffing is here by being out of character for this one day. You're being magnanimous. I think you are going to go for Christy Ring because you're a bit of a traditionalist when it comes down to it, and I actually don't know who your 4th is going to be. Who do you think he's gone for, Owen?
100% Dennis Irwin. He's we've got a football man on the line, a Cork man, and a Manchester United man on the line. Dennis Irwin, Roy Keane, Sonia O'Sullivan, and Jimmy Barry Murphy, I think, might actually be number 4. That's who I think Colm is going to pick.
Right. To quash all these rumours, my 4, right, each of my 4 reached the pinnacle of their respective sports. Each of my 4 transcended the sports in which they played to become cultural icons. But most importantly, each of my 4 people are instantly recognisable when you mention their first name.
So that's Christy, Roy, Sonia, and
Jimmy.
Rena.
No.
Derville.
I mean, think closer to home, lads. No. Think closer to home.
Okay, let's start. Roy Keane is number 1,
yes.
right? No questions asked. Like, no debate about this. The best player on the best team for a long period of time. The highest paid player at Manchester United per his contract. the heartbeat of that team, dragged Ireland to a World Cup. Unfortunately, didn't play in it. Did play in a World Cup and was our best player as a young player. And so I don't think there's any debate. I did see somebody saying that they could have somebody else ahead of him because it would be less fractious, but that was bollocks. So anyway, okay, so he's number one. Sonia O'Sullivan is on your list, right?
Of course, yeah, you have to be. And actually, what I found interesting about Sonia in all of this, what I'm seeing on Twitter and people going mad with suggestions saying this person should be in instead of this person, that's a disgrace, even though I haven't said the list yet. But the one person who hasn't been debated at all about their removal is Sonia. Everybody says, yeah, Sonia's definitely in. And she deserves to be in because her record is unbelievable. And also she's a great person. And she's probably, out of the four I have, is the biggest role model, I would say, to both genders of all ages. So Sonia's undoubted. But, you know, there's not much to be said either. Like, there's not a whole lot more to say about Roy Keane. But we can still say it to emphasise. I mean, Roy Keane's probably the greatest sportsman the country's ever produced. No?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's hard to argue against that take. I think if you're making an Ireland Mount Rushmore, I think Roy Keane makes it definitely. I think that there's definitely a case to be made for him being Ireland's greatest sports person as well in terms of pure achievements. And like for me, that's what this should be, Colm. It is about pure achievement and pure greatness. Being a role model is fantastic and all, but for me, it's not about the role models in this. This is pure cold etching stone into a mountain. So it's achievement only, and I think Sonia's achievement obviously makes her definitely one of the top two candidates for this. But like Roy Keane, in terms of somebody who has achieved unbelievable things in a sport that is so competitive, so well watched, a global superstar in that sport, I don't think anybody actually would touch him in an Irish sense, let alone a Cork sense. Now, like you might be referring to George Best perhaps, or something like that, as somebody who might come close. But other than that, he has everything. He ticks every box when it comes to greatness.
But he also he had to work. He had to work for it too, because he started off slowly. He was working on a Foss course. Nottingham Forest gave him his chance. Debut away to Liverpool. Brian Clough says to him, "Son, you can do two things. You can keep the ball and you can pass the ball." And he ended up doing that for the rest of his career. That culminated in the British transfer record to Manchester United. 7 Premier League titles, Champions League, 4 FA Cups. Stood up to bullies, walked out in 2002 World Cup, left United 3.5 years later, and wowed our audience last September in Bargash Energy Theatre too. So he has it all. And also, just a personal story about Roy too. When I was 12 years old, I flirted with death big time in Spain. I went through a glass door and I had a couple of life-saving operations. So I was in Spain recuperating. It was very touch and go for a while. But in the meantime, Roy was helping out in the background. Someone got in touch with him. And when I got back to Cork, I had a jersey sent from Roy Keane that he wore against Sturm Graz in the Champions League in 1997. So I have that signed up on the wall at home in Cork. And when we had our roadshow last September in the Bargash, I went up and thanked him in person. And he very much humoured me for 30 seconds. And he was like, no problem at all. And actually, the person who sorted it out, the middleman, was a very, very close friend of his who was subsequently passed away. So we were talking about that on the night. And it was brilliant. He was just saying, oh, yeah, there's no problem at all. And that's the side of him that people don't know, because there's obviously the very contentious side. Some of the stuff he does, you're not going to agree with. But that's the other side that he gets no publicity for at all. And he was very kind to me that night because he went along with it, went along with the charade.
I mean, obviously he remembered it, and you were the guy seems like it was an important character in his life because he was able to reach out, and that was when Keane was at his absolute peak. It's those couple of years. So before and after he comes back from his cruciate, is at his absolute peak. He scores the winning goal in a World Club Cup final. Like they are world champions, and he scores the winning goal in it. And then the next year is the year that they come out of the FA Cup. So the tournament is kind of happens at an earlier stage. So they're actually only World Club champions for a very short period of time. I might have to, certainly in my memory, that's what happened. But he scores the winner in a World Cup final, like for Manchester United. It is absolutely the stuff of dreams. And we do underrate, I think. You might be right. He is probably first straight up on Ireland's mountain. So he's got to be first on Cork's as well. Yeah, what are your criteria? Because Nathan's criteria were a bit like made up, essentially. He was like, I could put this guy who won Was it 5 Olympic gold medals on? But actually, I know Kev, and I'm going to his wedding, so I'm putting Kev on instead. That was essentially, when it came down to it, when it boiled down to it, that was Nathan Murphy's level of analysis. What are yours?
Yeah, well, that's because like Nathan had to get clever, really, to think about who's actually going to make this on the Mayo 4. But the Cork 4, there were so many. So I was saying to Tommy Rooney beforehand that I actually have selected a 4 most talented Cork to go on a separate Mount Rushmore that we'll put up in Myrtleville, I think. So for this one, it was purely based on achievement. And as I said at the start of this, reaching the pinnacle of their sport as well. And also what was very important for me, and there was a lot of living legends and those who have passed who haven't made this, because I had to be diverse. As you well know, Cork is a great sporting county throughout loads of sports. So I had to have a representative of each sport, or as many as possible, obviously. And those individuals had to be at the pinnacle.
Not sure about that. Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
I heard you say it earlier on. I was like, it doesn't matter. You have to go by individual achievement. No, this is for the people of Cork. I'm speaking on behalf of our county. And I could not return to my county if the 4 people I chose were not on my Mount Rushmore. Because...
But Rog is on.
Rog is on. Yeah, of course Rog is on. I mean, that's no debate at all. I couldn't believe it on Twitter when people saying, "Oh, get rid of Rog." It's unbelievable. 128 Irish caps, 1,083 test points, the most ever for Ireland, 4th most ever. 557 Six Nations points. The drop goal versus Wales, the 3 Triple Crowns, the performances in the Heineken Cup final in 2006, 2008. In 2011, the drop goal against Northampton. A week later against Castres. His try against Toulouse in 2000. His try against Leinster in 2006 when he's celebrating before he goes over. The list is endless. In 2010, he was voted the player who contributed most to the Heineken Cup in his first 15 years. Rugby Hall of Fame 2016. And they're just the stats. They're just the cold, hard stats. But also what O'Gara did, and it was part of my 3 criteria at the start, he transcended sport. He's a cultural icon. Everybody knows who Ronan O'Gara is, right? And the feelings that he has elicited, not just in Cork, but in the country, from what he's done on the pitch, is phenomenal. And also, there's not many people who would sit there in silence for 5.9 seconds when Joe Malloy asked them a question live on national TV to decipher Ireland's performance against England. But Ronan's his own man. He's quintessentially Cork. He just sat there and he was like, "No, I'll answer my own good time." I'm getting emotional here. Like Raj, this is unquestionable. I was offended on behalf of Ronan that it was even a consideration that he wasn't in this list. And I know what you're saying. The biggest name I've heard in terms of the omission from my list is Jimmy Barry Murphy. And I completely understand that. What he achieved as a player in hurling and football, what he achieved as manager in hurling in 1999, nearly again 2013. Unbelievable. And what a player. The goal against Galway in 1983 from a million miles out. Brilliant. But the thing with Jimmy Barry Murphy is, right, like, shoot me down if you want, but I'm going to say it, right? There's no genuine consideration of talk that Jimmy Barry Murphy is the greatest hurler of all time, nor the greatest footballer of all time, and nor the greatest manager of all time. Whereas Christy Ring is oft regarded as the greatest hurler of all time. And for a long time, he had won the most All-Irelands, scored the most points. It was only really when Kilkenny started dominating in this century that went by the wayside. But 8 All-Irelands for Christy Ring. And the fact that he would just, in an instant, turn a game whenever he wanted. And if you look, it takes 2 seconds to research. His peers at the time say he was, you can compare him to Pele in hurling. And he was that good and he can turn it on anytime he wants to. And actually, when I was researching Christy, because obviously, none of us saw him, but I was asking my dad, I was asking Billy Boohig, did you ever see him play when you were very young? And he said he did. He saw him play in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, the early 1960s. He had a free from the 21-metre line, straight into the top corner. And he said everybody in the goal line ducked. And he ducked behind the goal too because he thought it was going to go through the net. The guy was phenomenal. And he was doing this in his 40s. Like, the thing is, he won his first 4 All-Irelands. By the time he was 24, he'd won his 4th. But funnily enough, he's associated most with his longevity. Like, his career with Cork spanned 4 decades, from the late 1930s to the early 1960s. So, again, when I saw 1 or 2 people on Twitter saying, "Oh, geez, I might have JBM instead of Christy Ring. I was like, Jesus. And I know there's a JCB full of JBM worshippers coming towards this Mount Rushmore to knock it down. But I'm sorry, he can't get in. He can't.
You talked about being a cultural icon, right? And I think that's the thing that JBM had. It was the sideburns, it was those white jerseys that the football team played in, that the footage today still looks like. The GAA has never been sexier than when he was free running as a Gaelic footballer. And I think also the fact that it's colour TV footage of hurlers with no helmets, which is the glory days of us knowing who these people were. That's one of the big issues with, they put helmets on everybody and suddenly we don't know what everybody looks like. So there's an iconography associated with JVM that just Christy Ring doesn't have, because certainly now there are few enough people left who actually saw him in his absolute pomp, who can explain to us that he was better than Shefflin, or he could do this that TJ Reid couldn't do, or actually he was a combination of those two players, and so therefore you would automatically, if someone came and explained he's a cross between TJ Reid and Henry Shefflin, you'd be like, well, I mean, I'm sorry, but there's absolutely no way he can't be on it. But you did make the point about JBM being the manager of the team in '99, which gets overlooked. That's a team, again, festooned with kids that needs a sense of identity, and that identity comes from having this legend of the game being the cool, steady hand. Obviously, the good coaches around that team as well. So, look, I can see both sides of this argument. I can absolutely see both sides of this argument.
You see, the thing with, I completely understand the JBM fanfare, and he was definitely the fifth Beatle in this, if you want to call it. But for Christy Ring, his impact as a cultural icon is unquestioned. If you were to paint a picture of Cork, how would you illustrate Cork in one painting? And if Christy Ring was not in that painting, it wouldn't be a fair representation of Cork.
In fairness,
when his funeral took place, it took 3 hours for the funeral procession to go from the 20-minute journey from Cork City to his hometown of Clyne. It took 3 hours. People were weeping. Jack Lynch, his former teammate, ex-Taoiseach, said it at his own funeral. As long as hurling is played, the story of Christy Ring will be told. And I think he completely transcends the sport. When you think of Cork sporting legends, he comes into everybody's mind. That's why when the call ended with Tommy the other day, when he asked me to pick my four, he was in there within the first 10 seconds. And he hasn't budged.
There's also the situation, if you refer to Jimmy Barry Murphy's sideburns and the style icon that he was, Christy Ring's hat is up there. If you could have items in the GAA museum, you might have Jimmy Barry Murphy sideburns for sure, but you'd also have Christy Ring's hat. So I think using the phrase icon with regards to any GAA person in Cork, Christy Ring is the winner. The question you have on a Gaelic Games level, Colm, is whether the modern dominance of Cork and Camogie and women's football warrants inclusion. For me, that's actually a greater question here, as opposed to who's actually the bigger icon between Jimmy Barry Murphy and Christy Ring. 18 All-Ireland medals is surely something that you can't ignore. It's obviously something that you did because you were like, this is my four and that's it. Between Dennis Irwin and between the 18 All-Ireland medals, 36 between two women, there is, I think, more of a consideration than you think for the top four Cork sports people.
I have no doubt that Rena Buckley and Breach Corkery are both very hard done by here. Their accumulation of medals is it's actually ridiculous. And the fact that Rena captained as well in both disciplines. Look, if I could extend this Mount Rushmore, I would, but I can't, lads. I have to have a representative. That's why this is hard. But I don't think if you ask Rena or Breach, and if I said, look up there now, look up on Patrick's Hill, who would you take down? Who, lads? Who would you take down?
I'm sorry, but you can't do that.
I absolutely can if they were up for it. I'd show them.
If Roy Keane was there, right?
Yeah.
He would be like, look, what are you putting me up there for? You're not putting the postman up for delivering the mail. But actually, maybe after this, we all will put postmen up, and we probably should do because they're absolute heroes. But anyway, his point is, blah, blah, blah. He's too humble. You can't be asking people to be, I should be up there. Take down Christy Ring. That's a very unfair question, Colm, I think. And an unfair way of you're not really into your medals here. The Dennis Irwin argument, Dennis Irwin reached the absolute peak. in football, which is the most played sport in the world. He made it all the way to Manchester United and stayed there. So I just Cork exceptionalism is important, and the rowers, not even a hint of mention for the rowers.
Look, give Gary and Paul O'Donovan another 10 or 20 years' time, and they'll be on the updated version of Mount Rushmore. Certainly, Paul. I've no doubt about that. And look,
just to put a little bit of pressure on Paul now, who's obviously watching this. Does Paul need to win a gold medal to get on?
Really, COVID might screw him over in terms of him being included in your Mount Rushmore. What if his peak was 2020?
What does he need a goal? Does he need a gold medal literally to get on this?
No. Look, I have Sonia O'Sullivan on this, and she got a silver medal at the Olympics. But it's what she did over her whole career. Sonia had that record, that 2,000-meter record, which was only broken in 2017. That started in 1994, and she was the fastest in the world. It was 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 meters. I actually think, and of course the World Championship as well in 1995. That summer of 95, I think she won 32 of her 33 races that summer. But I actually think the disappointment and the heartbreak of Atlanta in 96 kind of actually helped Sonia's story because of the redemption in 2000. And again, I have to go back to the cultural influence, because I remember that race in 2000 in Sydney. I was in school, and school stopped for 15 minutes. And everybody watched this one TV. And I was seeing teachers who had never expressed any emotion whatsoever, other than being a teacher, lose their mind when Sonia was running in that home straight, trying to catch that gold spot.
It is. I get total emotion watching it now to this day, because it was fulfilled after everything. You're right. Look, I don't think Sonia's going down for any reason. There's been a lot of debate here, and we're actually out of time right now, so I might talk to you again a little bit later on to make you defend yourself against some of the other people who are making very rational arguments about this. Colm, well done. You put your head above the parapet. You've made your decision. You're going to live or die by that decision. It's hard to argue with some of it, but we're going to do our best anyway. Colm Boohig there giving us Cork's Mount Rushmore. 087 918 180 is the number to WhatsApp us on. It is coming up to 9 o'clock this morning, and this is OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. We are on air from 7:30 to 10 during lock-in or lockdown. We're not done yet, obviously. After the break, very special guest going to join us for the OTB Culture Club, brought to you by Now TV, and it's Dermot Kennedy. If you happen to miss any of the show this morning, don't worry. You can subscribe to the OTB AM podcast stream wherever you get your podcast. We timestamp it so you can just scroll through to whatever you want. On last night's football show, Mark Chapman of the BBC joined Joe, and of course, he had a Kevin Kilbane story.
Is it enjoyable, or is it a kind? I mean, it must be a surreal thing when the match of the day music plays.
No, it's amazing. It's it's massively enjoyable. I mean, first of all, whatever people think about pundits, and they get, it amuses me how much stick a lot of pundits get, but they've played the game at the highest level.
Sure.
So to sit and watch football with them and then tell me what they would do in a certain situation is still a privilege. And as I've said several times,
often more interesting than the game.
Yeah, often more interesting than the game. And you are sitting there, and Kevin Kilbane will be able to back this story up. You've got other screens going on, as well as the games. Now, often there isn't much else going on, right? But there might be a bit of cricket going on, and so you can keep an eye on that for other things. And I can remember doing one, Rude Hullet and Kevin, and one game finishing, and the hurling, I think, may have been on one of the other Sky channels. So Kevin explaining hurling to Rude Hullet is an incredibly surreal moment for me. But doing anything with Rude, I think if you'd have said to the 14, 15-year-old me who watched Euro 88 and thought, my God, this is the best team I've ever seen, that I would be watching Premier League football with Rude Hullet and talking about it with him, I'd have never have believed them. So sure. I never ever forget that. And the music's an interesting one, because now you're so used to it, it's fine. You go and do one of those FA Cup draws and people hear it and the buzz that goes around the room when the music starts, or you get a new pundit and you can see them. You can see the new pundit if they are nervous. That music starts because it's live, and they grip the side of their chairs when that music starts. It has an amazing effect on people.
I presume Ruud Gullit quickly acknowledged that hurling was indeed the game of the gods, the greatest game he had ever seen.
I mean, it was that. There was one conversation about hurling and one on dressage with Ruud. I mean, both of them slightly surreal, I'll be honest with you.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
This is after a Glasgow University research which showed that former footballers were 3.5 times more likely to die from brain disease than people of a similar age who hadn't played football. That's a tough worry to have for you, isn't it? That's probably not one that you like to dwell on too often.
No, I'm acutely aware of it, to be perfectly honest, in terms of how vulnerable I potentially will be to it, which is a pretty dark thought as such.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
The OTB Culture Club, brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.
All right, you're very welcome along to this week's edition of the OTB Culture Club, sponsored by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for on Now TV. And I'm delighted to say our special guest this week is Dermot Kennedy. Dermot, in some environments, you're quite famous as a singer, but actually it's as a footballer that many other people might know you from the Leinster Senior League. 2015, 2016, that was the heyday of your time bestriding the Leinster Senior League like a colossus.
yeah, that was probably 2015, 2016 probably was the best time for me playing football. That was class, yeah. It was just, I played for Rathcoole, which is just local for me, and it was that beautiful thing, just playing with your friends for years. Then I went to Naas, and then eventually went to Crumlin, yeah. Playing in Crumlin was the best thing, though.
Crumlin are pretty good. There's a very good standard, a long tradition of, world-class footballers coming from Crumlin.
Yeah, it felt class, and you can just tell, I don't know, it can be such an intimidating thing when you're changing team, and especially they were just known as such a strong club, but it was just a really welcoming atmosphere, and it became something that was so important to me, just as part of my life and as part of my week, and especially as music got busier and all that. It's there's so much that you put everything into music. You're constantly thinking about it. There's so much emotion involved, and football was just this release whenever I needed it. So it was just this lovely sort of routine, and it was very important to my life. Yeah.
There's always a good story about amateur footballers changing clubs. So what was your was it a big money move across town to kind of what happened?
Nah, it was grand. I wasn't sought after enough for it to be a controversial thing.
Where did he play, Dermot? What sort of footballer were you?
Played in centre midfield. I kind of always played in centre midfield, and I went playing senior when I was 18, and I was tiny and I was real wiry, and I never got tired ever playing. But this thing was happening where I was playing against 30-year-olds, and if it came to it physically, I just got bashed, and so I ended up going to the gym loads and all that. And then I got bigger and lost a certain amount of pace. So I would say I gradually sort of declined, because the best thing, you cannot sort of, no matter how big and strong you get, you can't beat that feeling of just being able to run around the pitch and outrun everybody. It's a beautiful thing.
Come here, you're obviously not playing football anymore, or do you miss it?
Oh, I miss it mad, yeah. I think, I was saying, it's just, it was really important to me in terms of relief, and the way people, the same way when you kind of are on stage doing that, and you get that feeling, you just feel comfortable and sort of at peace. I think sport was that for me too, so I miss it an awful lot.
Yeah, I saw you making that point actually in the tweet with Jimmy Butler there recently, that it's interesting, the level of ambition required is very similar, the level of dedication is very similar. Is the level of adrenaline similar? I know obviously the music career has gone a hell of a lot better than the football career, and the football career went well, but still there is a relative sense of adrenaline you would have got off being a footballer. Are they any way comparable?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I really, really, really do think so. And music's a funny one, because my vocal coach was saying this to me recently, is that the music industry is set up in such a way that you have to be really tough and ambitious and aggressive almost to get what you want. But then your character is to be super sensitive and like really gentle, and that has to live in your music. So in sport, maybe you can always kind of like say the likes of LeBron James or whoever, it can all be just aggressive and push forward and just work. Whereas in music, you have to like check yourself and make sure you're creatively centered and being balanced and all that. But it definitely takes a similar amount of work, I'd say. That's why like when I do run into the likes of Jimmy Butler, I don't sort of think like, oh, what are we going to talk about? Because I think it's a similar sort of journey, you know.
Come here, how are you getting the release, like obviously before this happened, that you were getting from sport now that you're not playing football and you don't have that organised outlet in your life to take you out of the constantly being consumed by being in tune with everything that you've just spoken about there?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's hard sometimes, especially when you're on tour for a couple of months and like it gets to a point on tour where you are just tired sometimes. So you don't force yourself to go running around Dallas or Albuquerque or wherever you are. And you find it. I think you kind of get, I think you do get a buildup of not even necessarily anxiety, but just you can find yourself like if you don't have that release over a while, it can just be a little bit stressful, I think. But that's why like I struggle with just going for a run. I always say that to people because like nothing compares to playing a match when you're actually competing with people and there's a ball to chase and there's something on the line. I find it mad just kind of going for a run for an hour, you know.
Yeah, like I'm not sure did you see the Liam Gallagher documentary recently, but it's interesting when he's kind of when there's footage of him on tour at the moment and he's got his family and he's going for his runs in the morning and he's keeping himself very healthy. Complete sea change from Liam Gallagher tour days of the 90s. On what end of the spectrum are you? Are you 90s Liam Gallagher? Or are you 2019 Liam Gallagher?
Nah, yeah, I would be closer to 2019. I do. I look after myself and the schedule is so mad that I think you couldn't do it any other way. There's times when you're playing 4 nights in a row and you're in 4 different cities and there's flights in between and there's promo in between and all that. So I'm definitely on the more boring end of the scale when it comes to partying and all that. But I don't know. I think especially a big thing for me is my voice, keeping on top of that and being able to go out and do it because I put an awful lot of strain on it. So, it is a boring sort of, it's definitely not like the partying lifestyle, but I do think you have to treat it like an athlete almost. If you want to do a good job all the time, I think you have to be quite careful. Yeah, you have to sleep and like you have to be the one that at like straight away after a gig, you're like, I'm good, like I'm going to bed. I can't go out to a bar in every city we're in, you know.
So you're late stage Roy Keane as opposed to early stage Roy Keane.
Yeah, that was mental, wasn't it, when he started out? Just in the book and everything. It's just like, yeah, he used to basically go out for drinks and a scrap every time he felt like it, yeah.
Nights in the cells where Ferguson would arrive down and get him out and wouldn't say anything to him because, you know, he probably couldn't. If he started talking, he wouldn't have stopped. But there's all sorts of stories. And there's, like, I think some of the best stories didn't even make it into Roy's book. There's other books out there that are worth digging out for that. Okay, one of the things you talked about on social media recently was about embracing the stillness. This is obviously a very unusual time for all of us. You've been playing gigs kind of most nights on Instagram and on various charities' Facebook pages just to help out. What has this whole experience been like for you?
It's been cool. I mean, I can't lie that it at the beginning it's a strange thing to have been on tour and playing all these beautiful venues and theaters, and then you're like setting up in your living room and trying to treat that with the same amount of respect and all that, and so it can be something that I'm quite cynical about literally until you start playing the songs, because it's just you can instantly see that people care about it and that they've showed up and that they are there to listen, and so. And then obviously the most important thing is that I'm doing it for charity basically every time I'm doing it. So it's just nice. And you get comments after people saying like they kind of look forward to it because everybody's stuck at home and that could be so hard for people. So I think there's a lot of people saying they look forward to them. And it's been a nice sort of little new thing because obviously it's a tiny corner of society, but like I think all musicians are adapting to this now and everybody's kind of scrambling to figure out how they do their jobs in this weird time, and so but they've been enjoyable and if I can help and make people's day slightly easier and raise a bit of money too. I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're of a generation where the power of the internet was something that really helped grow an audience, and it's funny because the original Napster was supposed to kill the music industry and was going to prevent new music from ever being discovered, because people would actually not have the opportunity to discover it because the record companies weren't going to put millions and millions behind the marketing campaigns. But actually what happened was there was a democratization of the pathway. So you could put a song up on YouTube, and if it was good, people would watch it. Missing the connection with the audience, I guess, is something, though, that as somebody who does tour quite a lot, that bit isn't there. But there is the YouTube, and there are the Spotify figures, and there is everything else going on. So what is that like?
Oh, 100%. And if there's anywhere, obviously social media and just online presence is an important part of my career, whether I choose to accept it or not. And if anything, when I'm busy on tour and all that, it's the only place I kind of slow down and maybe fall down slightly. But I never care because I'm doing it in real life. I'm like, I'm not going to post all day today because I have a gig tonight, and like that is just at the forefront of my mind. But so now, if anything, this kind of gives me a chance to be more present in that way. And yeah, like we've got songs lying around that just songs that didn't make the album. And so now this is the thing, like potentially do we just release a bunch of extra songs? Do we do like a surprise sort of EP or something? I'm not sure, but there's loads of stuff to do. Even Hosier, when he was on the Late Late the other night, it's like Take Me to Church was his first release, you know, like, and I literally remember Mihal, our drummer, showing it to me in his kitchen and just being like, oh, there's this song I heard. And that was, I think it had a few thousand views, but it just shows you like you can literally have a career just based off something blown up on the internet. It's crazy.
It's interesting, actually, Jared, you mentioned Napster there. Like, I'm not sure if either of you have read this, but I'm reading Lizzie Goodman's oral history book on New York post-2001 and the music scene there at the moment. And she touches on that point of Napster and how not only does it bring an audience closer to the artist, it also widens the audience's music tastes dramatically. It's like why you have record labels like DFA Records coming up in New York as a result of that, where they don't pick one genre, they completely spread out. And I think that's been the case in your career as well so far, Dermot. I mean, working with Mike Dean is something interesting. It's something that an artist in your position may not have done 20 years ago, maybe not even 10 years ago. Can you talk us through that experience working with somebody who's known for working with Kanye and Tupac and Jay-Z?
Yeah, of course. That's really interesting that you say that. And I think that probably does go a long way towards why genres are so loose these days. And like before I even mentioned Mike Dean, the person that often comes into my head is Travis Scott, because it's obviously this heavy hip hop, but it's so melodic and musical as well. And obviously Mike Dean goes a long way towards making that happen. But yeah, it's just things are kind of looser than ever. And you see like how important James Blake was in the making of Travis Scott's album. It's just everybody, just whoever's creative is invited. And if it's new and if it's fresh, then people want to do it. But working with Mike Dean was cool. Yeah, like you never know what to expect when you're going around LA, like, and there's a new thing in your calendar and you haven't met the person before. You literally just rock up, like get an Uber to an address, you don't know where it is, and you just go in and try and do your best. And sometimes it's difficult, but sometimes it's easy. But with him, it was easy. He's the nicest guy, like really is, especially considering he's achieved more than anybody, but he's still, and especially he's achieved so much, but it's still completely about the music, like 100%. I saw the maddest thing. I think it was something like something he's worked on has been released every 7 days for the last 27 years or something. How hard he works is just mental. So it was really cool. And also like, that was a year and a bit ago probably that I worked with him. And so he certainly didn't know who I was. And he treated me as if I sort of had a giant reputation, you know? I think if you make music, he just cares and he wants to work with you. It's really cool.
How does something like that come about? Is that like, I guess it strikes me that you have to be willing yourself to experiment and experience new things. And that speaks to a curiosity, I would suggest, about what else is out there. But how does something like that actually come about in the first place?
In terms of how it actually happens, it's just labels getting in touch, but also in terms of me being open to it, yeah, it took me a long time to be willing to work with people. I always had this. I'm a big fan of Bon Iver and Hozier and Ben Howard and stuff, and I think those are artists who sort of keep to themselves and do everything themselves. And I always thought like that, and I always loved the idea of recording at home, and I never wanted to share anything with anybody because I was horrified by this idea of like, oh, what if they suggest a certain line of lyric and then I end up on tour for 2 years singing what they thought about. And I'll still argue that I definitely write my best lyrics when there's no one else there. It's a strange thing when you're in the studio and you've got 3 hours left and you have to come up with a chorus. And it's like, this isn't how you're supposed to create things, you know? Like, if this doesn't show up in the next 3 hours, like, who cares? Like, it could take 2 weeks. It just doesn't matter. And so I still like working by myself for that reason. But it took me a long time to be open to it. And if younger songwriters ask me now, I'm just like, it's worth the graft for when you finally do get to work with Mike Dean, or you find a lifetime collaborator who does understand what you're doing and you feel completely comfortable in the room with them. It's worth all the weird sessions where you go back to like an Airbnb and you question everything. It is worth that.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Okay, just a reminder, everybody, why we're here. It's the OTB Culture Club. It's sponsored by Now TV. Stream award-winning dramas such as Game of Thrones and Parks and Recreation. Dermot, we're asking everybody to bring a piece of culture to this, to explain it to us, to tease it out. We had Rocky 3 was our first one with Andy Lee.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it turns out Rocky 3, much underrated film, I think. And,
Really?
It's well worth a rewatch. It's hilarious, and I'm not sure it always means to be, but I recommend it. You've gone for something classical, I suspect, at this point. We're 20 years on from the release of Gladiator. Why should we put Gladiator in the OTB Culture Club?
The general became a slave. The slave who became a gladiator. The gladiator who defied an emperor. Only a famous death will do.
The frost. Sometimes it makes the blade stick.
You find yourself alone, riding in green fields with the sun on your face. Do not be troubled, for you are in Elysium, and you're already dead. Brothers, what we do in life echoes in eternity.
Well, it's funny you should say that about Rocky 3, because I watched Gladiator again recently, and it's been my favorite movie forever. So when I was asked about this, I was just like, it's a gimme. Like, my answer is always Gladiator. But I watched it recently, and some of the fight scenes, I was just like, oh dear. Like, it looked old. But it's always been my favorite movie. I think I just love, it's Ridley Scott, and he did Man on Fire too, and Gladiator and Man on Fire to me are kind of similar in the sense that something happens at the beginning and it's this guy's like quest for justice and revenge, and I just think it's a really powerful thing to think. Obviously he's betrayed by Commodus, and his wife and son are killed, and that happens early on, and then the whole movie is just his quest to get revenge, and he sort of keeps his head down, stays quiet about the whole thing, and just goes through the phases and eventually gets that face to face with Commodus again. I just think it's the coolest movie ever. Also, it's like it's set in Italy, and when they go to Rome, I just think I think when you're in Rome, you can really, I feel like you don't get it in many cities, but when you're in Rome, you can almost feel what it would have been like the Pantheon's still there, the Colosseum's still there. Like, you can almost imagine what it was like back then, just in terms of landscape and how epic it must have been. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, the Colosseum is one of those few tourist destination things that you do in the world and you come away with your mind blown. It's not like, oh, you've got to go and see this thing, and you're like, oh yeah, whatever. But then you go there, you're like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Oh man, yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah, there's so much there, and yeah. So I love how it's treated with so much reverence. Like when they've sort of had a few fights, and then eventually you get to go to Rome, and your man Proximo, like I was in a band called Shadows and Dust for 4 years. That's actually pretty relevant to this. Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but yeah, I was in a band called Shadows and Dust for 4 years, and that's where that came from. And yeah, the way they go to Rome, and it's just as if it's this incredible, like, this is the pinnacle of their lives. I think it's crazy.
So teenage Dermot Kennedy was basically wandering around quoting Gladiator in every conversation, right?
Yeah.
So what is it about the fighting, Dermot, that is not up to scratch in a 2020 context for you?
The first one when they're chained to each other, and he's with that guy that he's kind of like got this friendship with, and I don't know, it looked a little bit like, it just looked like basic or something. These days it would just be the most incredible thing. It looked like it was made 20 years ago, that's all.
Yeah, even like comparing it to Game of Thrones kind of puts it in its back pocket, but like it's just incredible how it's all moved on in the last 20 years. Like you mentioned Ridley Scott there, you mentioned Russell Crowe there. Are we seeing two people at this moment in time at the absolute peak of their powers, and that combination? And of course, Joaquin Phoenix, I mean, like his peak is obviously, someone may argue, was 2019, but are we seeing almost at least two peaks here, and that's why we have something so special?
I think so, and it must be a strange thing as an actor. It's in every art form, right? Like there's probably people who say Kendrick's thing is To Pimp a Butterfly, and who knows, like he'll probably have a bunch of classic albums, but I'd say a lot of people might be like, that's his moment. And as actors, you're probably pushing for that same thing. And like you said, Joaquin Phoenix, his thing could be Joker, and it could just forever be his like masterwork. But I feel like that's probably it for Russell Crowe too. Yeah, but it must be mad, like 20 years ago, and then to be still doing it and be like, oh man, I never really touched that again. But I don't know. Yeah, who knows? And also like Ridley Scott is just constantly doing cool things. I could have chosen Man on Fire too. I think that's a beautiful movie.
I actually thought that, so I've got a confession to make here. I hadn't sat down and watched the whole thing from start to finish ever, because for whatever reason, I hadn't seen it in the cinema, and then I was going to wait and watch it. And so last night I sat down and watched the whole thing in one continuous go. I'd seen bits of it before. I'd seen the Tigers before, and that was kind of, it stuck out with me. And I kind of knew what was coming, but it is really, really, really good. There's the politics, there's the fights, which I think are actually do stand up quite well. Certainly the ones with the chariots, I'm like, oh, there was definitely a few.
And when your one gets cut in half by the thing on the
ball. That was class. And the bit about I'm gonna have to take issue with that on that Game of Thrones puts it in its back pocket. Game of Thrones is such a rip-off of this. So many of this, the plot, the brother and sister, like, come on.
I'm talking about the fight scenes. I'm giving Dermot credit here for the fight scenes. Like, of course, Game of Thrones puts it in its back pocket with the budget and with the developing technology. As a political story, maybe there is a bit of similarity.
This is an OG. This definitely feels like it's the OG for that. And it kind of.
I love how like it's this sort of guy who's so honorable and so sort of like noble, who kind of just holds on to this thing he's got inside him for the whole movie. And even when he is chained up before he fights Commodus at the end, he comes up and like hugs him and stabs him, and still he doesn't say anything. And there's so many times when he's like done wrong but has to keep his mouth shut. It's the same as fucking Ronaldo in the World Cup final against Germany, like being knackered and still scoring twice and gets man of the match. Stuff like that. I think stuff like that always resonates with me, and so I think it's really cool.
Dermot, I wanted to ask about your opinion on the score in this film, because it's been a while since I've watched Gladiator back. I'm like, what is this? It's from the very first scene when they're fighting in Germania. I'm like, what is this? What is this music? It's like, this is not Gladiator. It's Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, it's an absolute note for note Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, thankfully, it is Hans Zimmer involved in both, so I'm not sure if you can yourself off. But I hadn't realised that, like, if you're talking about OGs, like Pirates of the Caribbean, you were not the first to that incredible soundtrack. Gladiator did it, 4 or 5 years before you?
Right, yeah. And Hans Zimmer's kind of been on everything. There must be times when he's in the studio and he's like, how do I do this again? But yeah, beautiful music. And then the main sort of, that's cool too, the main motif that kind of comes back and in throughout Gladiator, and is that thing where he always thinks of home and thinks of how it used to be. I think that's beautiful. I went to a thing once in the Bord Gáis Theatre, and it was the orchestra playing while the movie was up on screen. A few years ago I went, but it was class. Yeah, it was so good.
Yeah, I often think that like Hans Zimmer must get into a studio to write a score for a film. And you know, like the thing that came out recently where some university has developed every single melody possible. I think Hans Zimmer is probably just a person who has created every single melody possible that's ever been associated with a film.
And who knows? He's probably got a team of people who get it to 90%, and then he comes in and does his thing. You never know. Like,
I know we've got a couple of other topics to get into on this movie. The other thing that I did when doing a quick bit of research this morning on Gladiator, Dermot, have you heard about Gladiator 2?
No.
Well, first of all, there is Gladiator 2. It's coming sometime down the line. But
Seriously?
The original, there is, yeah. But the original Gladiator 2, Russell Crowe wanted to make a version where he could be in Gladiator 2. And I don't know why he did this, but he asked one Nick Cave to make Gladiator 2 or to write the screenplay for Gladiator 2. So obviously two Aussies, they're probably friends. And Nick Cave writes this entire thing. And he's like, you do know your character is dead in this? And he's like, yeah, go on, still write it. So Nick Cave writes this in the afterlife where Maximus comes back to life, where his family comes back to life. Like there's a BBC article done on this where then the character then starts time traveling, where he goes through the battle through the centuries and the Crusades and the World Wars in Vietnam, and then finally in the Pentagon, something resembling X-Men Origins. And Russell Crowe is like, nah, mate, I don't like it, and I got shelved. So like Nick Cave is sitting on a potential blockbuster.
Could you like it? Yeah, that's like Russell Crowe in South Park. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, what a classic
fighting around the world thing. Yeah.
That might actually be peak Russell Crowe, the fighting around the world, where his reputation is that like everywhere he goes, there's a weird group of people traveling with him, and his entourage is constantly involved in scraps. But actually, it's him. They're the ones dragging him out of the fight.
It's so bad that when he goes to the hospital and everything, it's so bad.
We asked people for a moment from the movie. In this case, is there a single moment that you're like, yeah, that's the whole hinge point, or that's my favorite scene, or anything that sticks out specifically?
It's funny. It's such a huge movie that some things sort of start to seem cliche, but obviously the "Are You Not Entertained" bit is classic. I think the bit when in that first battle scene, when he's sort of talking to, it's like almost him and these guys are like this elite group and they're off in a different patch of the forest somewhere. And he said that thing of like, if you find yourself like with the sun on your backs and all, he was like, don't be afraid because you're in Elysium and you're already dead. I think that's really cool. So I studied ancient Greek and Roman classics in college. I had to do like a minor sort of thing as well as doing music, and that was what I did. So I think it resonates with me for that too. But I just think that's really cool. There's so many bits that are great, but I love that bit, yeah.
Did you 100% do classics because of Gladiator? Is that like you're there going, I'm doing music plus?
Yeah, honestly, I was just like, I knew it would. I just knew it was something I'd be into. I still even like today I'll probably go off and play Odyssey, Assassin's Creed, that game, and that's just ancient Greece, and you literally run into like Hermes and Cyclops and all these old characters. It's stuff like that. I've always cared about that.
Do you get a buzz off all historically based television dramas and films? Or like, is it a situation?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I could tune into The Crown as well, and I'd be happy enough. Or Downton Abbey. I went to watch that by myself in LA. Like, I think, and even in those, nothing really happens. But just the way they look, and just to get a little peek into that life, I just think is crazy. Yeah.
Do you feel like you're a storyteller as a musician, or like what aspect, what's the kind of ratio of the importance of the story I'm telling versus like a singular message versus the ability to carry somebody with the music? I'm wondering how much of the storytelling and narrative side of filmmaking is something that actually appeals to you.
Right. Yeah, no, it is. And when I started, it was the only thing. I had a I had a much smaller appreciation for how the music can move people and how some people just don't care about lyrics. Like some people, it's just not, just music isn't about lyrics for them. I see it when I'm with the lads in the band, and like our bassist is just obviously like what he seeks out in a track is just the bass line and how that makes you feel. And Mihal, our drummer, is just constantly, like, there's certain arrangements and bands who just are his favorite thing in the world, and I'll go in and check the lyrics, and it's not something I'm into. I'd much rather go and like listen to rap music because that's where it's at its best for me. But I think it's important to do both, because I am more conscious of the fact now that you could go play a gig anywhere in the world and there could be people in the crowd who just lyrics aren't for them. And that's why when I started out, the whole thing was just acoustic, because I saw the guitar and the piano just almost as a vehicle to be able to get these words out. And but now I'm more conscious of the fact that for some people it's purely about the music. And so I'll always be a lyrics guy, but I do see the importance of a proper arrangement now and how that can move people. Oh, you're like the fella on Sky News now. How are you doing?
These are my kids. Some of them say hello, say goodbye. Right. Oh, and you might take over for a quick second there.
For sure, yeah. Like, that's a really interesting thing, that when you're thinking about what is the very thing that gives you meaning, is it a two-way street then? When somebody comes back to you and says, listen, I really love the lyrics in that song, or I really love the musical arrangement in that song, that you get a greater kick of hearing that feedback? Is it a two-way street in that regard?
I think I have a certain level of confidence lyrically, and then I feel like I'm trying to prove myself musically. Because if you go into the world of like Moderat and Explosions in the Sky and all these incredible musical arrangements, and we went to see John Hopkins as well, that was amazing, and stuff like that, the way that can move a whole crowd is so amazing. And so I guess my focus has always been like a lyrical thing, and I've always been so focused on how you can move people with your words. And so I feel like I'm almost playing catch up on the musical side of things, but I feel determined to prove myself in that way, because talking about people like Hans Zimmer, like, you don't need certain words to just have these incredible feelings from the music. And so I feel like, if someone goes to my gig and they couldn't care less about lyrics, I still want them to think it's an impressive thing.
Any interest in getting involved in movies at some point? Like,
I'd love it, yeah, but same thing. I feel like I'm so, like, I don't know, I'd be so sort of afraid of it, because I'd be so, like, unequipped or something, you know. There'd be massive sort of imposter syndrome. But I'm sure there's ways to like ease your way in and just like write a song for a movie, and then next thing you know, you might do a score for a movie and stuff like that. Yeah, but I definitely don't see myself just like doing music for 20 years and I don't do anything else. I don't see it like that.
Yeah, you've always got to fall back on your football career, though. That's like
that's
at
it.
some
Yeah,
point.
go back to over 35.
That dream never dies. I'm going to tell you that right now.
No.
What's next for you? You've been rearranging tour dates and hoping that this kind of all calms down to the point where you will actually be able to connect with those live audiences again.
Yeah, so basically I had a bunch of tours planned almost until September, and then I was going to take the final quarter of this year just to write and record and start thinking about the second album. And I guess both of those things have just done a flip now, and so all our rescheduled dates that we should have been doing currently are for that part of the year. So I have a bunch of stuff. I'm waiting for a bunch of stuff to get delivered, and I'm essentially setting up a studio at home. So talking about like how I like to make stuff by myself, I'll just be doing that until we're done. Who knows?
Do you have a place, Dermot, where you tend to get most inspiration from? Like, I can completely imagine the studio is the worst place almost to be put on the spot to write something. Is there a place that you found most success?
Right, yeah. I know I only touched on it a few minutes ago, but like I struggled a lot with this idea of like, okay, you're in London today, you're going to this studio and inspiration kind of has to strike. I was just like, how does that work? That seems so counterproductive to me. And it was for a long time. And then I just got more comfortable, and now I feel like I can kind of have good ideas, not on demand, obviously, but just like the setting becomes less important. But still, favorite place is like the piano in my parents' house. Like that is just where it works for me. And yeah, it's just literally being alone is so important, because you could be in a session with somebody, and if you sit at a piano and don't make any noise for like 10 minutes, no one's going to ask if you're okay. Like, you can just think for a bit, you know, there's no one else there. And so, yeah, being at home still is the best thing for me. And you got to be careful though, because it can be the most appealing thing and be like, oh, this would be the best work of my life. Like, this is the best thing I ever did. But then you are closed off from how the world might relate to it. So if you're working with somebody like Mike Dean, they might be like, nah, this isn't like culturally relevant. This won't appeal to people. And not that you should ever make something with the sole objective of trying to make people like it, but just, I think you can sort of disappear and sort of, I don't know, get a bit too lost in it. And it becomes a bit of a gratuitous thing, maybe, if you're just doing it by yourself all the time.
There was one last thing I just wanted to ask it struck me there when you were talking about some of the parallels between sport. You've had an unbelievably successful 18 months, but that's coming at the end of a 10-year period where you were grinding the whole time. So, I became an overnight success after 10 years of hard work. It kind of is a little bit like a sports career where you're kind of cresting to a level now where you feel comfortable, the comfort you talked about being on stage. How do you maintain that peak? How do you make sure that this is now what the new normal is, and that this is the level of expectation for your performance and for your art that you have into the future?
Yeah, and you certainly don't want to be the guy who comes out with the second album and everyone's just like, oh, he just is going to do the same thing like 5 times. And I think we've left it in a good place off the first album. I think there's enough sort of ballads and enough acoustic stuff balanced out with like hip hop production, programmed drums and all that. So I feel like it's in a place where we could take it either way. I feel like I could do an almost acoustic album, or we could go for it with the production and have it as a much more sort of like hip hop based thing in the way that it sounds. But yeah, I mean, there's like, even between album 1 and album 2, I'm very conscious of the fact that like the world moves on so fast now. So if you do hide away for like years and years, it's almost as if you lose that momentum. And I do get paranoid about that stuff. Like that's why I kind of work so hard, because I'm constantly worried that like because there's so many people sort of at the same level. And obviously music's funny in that sense too, because obviously sport is just outright competitive and you should never apologize for that. And you never feel bad about like competing against people. But then music is like, it's based on love and collaboration and sensitivity. So it's like, there shouldn't be that aggression, but it just does exist. Like it does. Like I'm well aware of the fact that there's a million guys with guitars trying to do the same thing. So I guess that's what pushes me forward. But yeah, you just keep working, try and do the best stuff.
Absolutely. Is there a way that you're leaning then, kind of as a final question, is it going to be more acoustic? Is it going to be more produced? I guess the next couple of weeks are actually going to be a really important part of that question.
No, I think the stripped back song will always be very important to me. And if I ever forget how important that is to me, I feel like I've lost my way a little bit, because that's why I started doing it, like because of Glenn Hansard and because of like Foy Vance and artists like that. That's why I wanted to do it in the first place, and that storytelling thing we were talking about. So if I ever lose sight of that, then I think that's a bad thing. But it's as easy as you could have an album that's fleshed out and is a total sort of like creative risk almost, and then as long as I've got one ballad in there, I'll be happy out. I feel like I've ticked that box, for want of a better phrase, but I feel like I'll have sort of like satisfied that part of me. So no, I really don't know. We'll see. I'm in a place where I'm not even thinking about the second album. I know I'll have to soonish, but like currently I'm just making music to make it.
It's not a bad situation to find yourself in. Look, you've been great with your time, Dermot, and I think we can all agree that Gladiator, it's kind of a 10 out of 10 movie, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Safe choice, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was a good one. And I'm delighted to sit down and watch the whole thing from start to finish. So I would recommend, if anybody hasn't seen the whole thing from start to finish, they do it. Well, listen, best of luck. We'll be following you on all your social channels. And whatever comes next, I'm sure it's going to be successful. Dermot Kennedy,
thanks
very much for joining us on OTB Culture Club. Sponsored by Now TV, stream award-winning dramas such as Game of Thrones and Parks and Recreation. You can also get Inside Out and Toy Story 4, Grey's Anatomy and Curb Your Enthusiasm as well. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back after this.
The OTB Culture Club, brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Yeah, so that was Dermot Kennedy there as part of the OTB Culture Club. His choice, Gladiator, is available to stream right now on Now TV. Funnily enough, Owen, we've had mild controversy about the Cork Mount Rushmore. I think this is relatively straightforward, picking the top 4 sports people from a county, but no. Colm Boohig himself has thrown a cat amongst the pigeons to say, to add to his actual Mount Rushmore, here's his bonus Cork Mount Rushmore of pure sporting talent. to be located in Myrtleville. John Fitzgibbon, Colin Corkery, Simon Zebo, and Stephen Ireland.
See, this is the thing. Now, it is very much in someone like Colm Boohig's interests to be throwing in added names, because this entire exercise for someone like Colm and for people in Cork is just to tell us how great they feel they are. So it's like, oh, look how tough this whole thing has been. God, those people who are sweating over etching this whole mountain out haven't worked as hard as us, the brains trust of putting together the Cork Mount Rushmore. Jeez, we've got so many decisions. We can put together 2 Mount Rushmores, 4 if you want to put them into different parts of the county. Look at this. We can even put together a Mount Rushmore of individual talent rather than actual greatness. Look at us, poor Cork, poor, stupid, talented Cork. That's what they want us to think.
I was making the point, you missed Brian Corcoran from that, who was, I think, one of the first, maybe the second ever All-Star who was unanimous at nomination stage. He wasn't even nominated. He just got an All-Star when the nominations were announced. And then Nathan, who, by the way, was abusing me on WhatsApp in the middle of that when I was telling the truth about how he had actually approached the whole thing. How about you stop backtracking and stand over your selections? The Cork I knew would never stand over such softness of conviction. Tim Hinton's been in touch to say Vincent O'Brien, Roy Keane, Sonia, Noel O'Leary, Roy, Rena, Christie, Sonia, Sean Hogue, Teddy McCarthy. I mean, Teddy McCarthy is the only man in history to win All-Ireland medals in the same year, the same month. Yeah, but it was the replay in October. It might have been. Anyway, you know what I mean. And completely not even mentioned once. I mean, Teddy McCarthy's achievements actually might be the perfect person to put on a Mount Rushmore because of what he did. Because of if this is about the high heights, there are no higher heights than being a player on a team that wins a double, right? Like there is a specifically by whatever criteria you have, there is a case for Teddy McCarthy.
A small case because, again, it's Cork. Vincent O'Brien was actually a good shout there as well. Somebody we didn't even discuss at any point over the past hour or so, given what he did for racing. But again, it's like you throw them in to 27, 28 of the other counties and they probably all make it. Not in Cork, though. And like Teddy McCarthy, of course, as an achievement at Mount Rushmore, maybe you have like... I don't know, winning multiple Premier Leagues, winning the double. Like if you put it into achievements, Grand Slam, it might make the achievement Mount Rushmore, but as an individual sports person, Mount Rushmore over sustained greatness for a prolonged period of time.
When did sustained greatness over a prolonged period of time become the thing? Like if you put Teddy McCarthy up on Mount Rushmore in Cork, everybody goes, "We won a double. That's how good we were. Nobody else has ever done that."
No,
we did it.
My point is not to downplay what Teddy McCarthy did. Like you were just saying, oh yeah, nobody would disagree with Teddy McCarthy's face up there. So which one are you taking down? Who does not get up there because of as a result of Teddy McCarthy? Are you taking away Christy Ring? Are you taking away Ronan O'Gara? Are you taking away Roy Keane? Or are you taking away Sonny O'Sullivan? Give me a name.
I think you're taking away Christy Ring. He's the exemplar of Cork GAA. It's like, Christy Ring is obviously the best they ever had.
So you would have Teddy McCarthy and Christy Ring on a Mount Rushmore.
Well, because of what he symbolises. Oh, obviously Christy Ring was the greatest hurler, but bear in mind that Cork is the only county that we can realistically see at any point in the future doing a double in hurling and football. Maybe Galway. Maybe Galway might be about to do it, and that would be interesting. Yeah, maybe actually Galway. And would there be anybody who might be able to play on both teams? I mean, obviously you're not allowed anymore because managers are such demanding people that they're suspicious of the training that you'd be getting from the other crowd. I just think that it would stand for so much. Like it would be an example of who we are as Cork. Our greatness is such that we didn't even put our greatest hurler on here or our greatest footballer. We put on the guy who won All Irelands in both them because we're Cork.
Dublin might be a potential sleeper when it comes to future dual county as well. Tipperary, of course, have done it in the past, haven't they? I know we're going back over 100 years ago to get that one. But yeah, like it's true. Like maybe some Cork people will say, actually, no, all we want is the hurling man up there. Of course, having the dual thing definitely kind of increases your sense of Corkness and how you can beat your neighbour at anything, really, even if your closest neighbour are supposedly the best at football. We can still beat them and we can still win All Irelands, and we can do both in the 1 year. So yeah, like that definitely kind of speaks to a huge element of Corkness. But I just think on this specific case, he wouldn't make it to the second Mount Rushmore, which sounds harsh, but not for me.
Yeah, I guess it's how you approach these things and what they're supposed to be. Like you're chiseling something in rock forever. If you put down Christy Ring, is he the greatest hurler? You're saying none of you hurlers will ever live up to this. I mean, you might be. I think everybody accepts that it's very unlikely we're going to have a player who captains Manchester United, who dominates English football in the way that they did. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely that we're going to have a footballer who reaches that level again. So the standard has to be to win the All Ireland in hurling and football, and I think there's an argument there for Teddy McCarthy. Final few comments on this. Derry Crean says, Roy, Ring, Breach and Sonia, unbelievable to miss Raj, Rena, Pat O'Callaghan, Dave Barry and JBM. # Rebels Aboo. Ben Egan, how you Ben? Says Jack Lynch, Christy Ring, JBM and Sonia. And Adrian Barry, whose own moment of shame is coming on the morning show, says 2 counties in and 2 shambles of selections. Says the man who wants to put Paddy and Joe Dolan and John Aldridge and Niall Horan on the Westmeath one. So, well, I mean, Niall Horan's done great work for that fringe golf tour that nobody knew about until he got involved in it. Right. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number that you can abuse us on if you feel so inclined. Of course, you can also just do that by leaving a comment on the YouTube channel, and many of you have been abusing us. So thanks very much for getting involved in today's show and being part of our journey this morning as the sun shines outside and we're all like, oh, wouldn't it be great to go outside? But God damn it, we can't. And if you want to leave a read for us, or if you want to leave a comment for us on Twitter @OffTheBall, it's the place to do that. Now, last night, as part of our Champions League Best Moments series in association with Virgin Media Sport, Joe caught up with the former Liverpool striker Neil Mellor, who was on the pitch when Stevie G scored in Olympiacos. Great interview. You should check that whole thing out and his detail of like how he made the fateful decision not to pass to John Arne Riise, who was going to shin it with his right foot into the crowd, or to give it to Stevie G, who was going to smack in You Beauty, that goal. Anyway, here he is talking about Fernando Morientes, who also has a fairly interesting story to tell. Have a look.
What are your memories of the final in Istanbul? Where do you watch that game?
Well, the 18 players who were part of the squad, they flew the day before, and we flew on the day of the game. And I remember getting to Liverpool Airport, Liverpool fans everywhere. It was brilliant. In the bars with the flags, singing songs. Obviously, we were part of the playing contingent, so we weren't allowed to drink. We got on a flight, got over to Turkey, made our way to the game. And when we were in the stand watching the game, 60-odd thousand fans that were inside Istanbul that night. At half-time, I was hurting. Obviously, we're losing 3-0, but these were my mates, not just teammates. They were my mates. I had breakfast with these lads most days of the week. I've trained with them. You know, I've had evening meals. I've shared rooms with a lot of them, really, really close. And to see my mates at half-time being embarrassed in probably the biggest game of certainly club football, that was quite hard to take. And so you're looking around thinking, just please, second half, let's just make a game of it. Let's try and get back into it. So we were in the stands, and obviously what happened that second half was, I watched it back with my 10-year-old boy the other day, and it's emotional still to look back now and think, I was inside that stadium and the boys did what they did. It was the greatest ever European Cup final. Absolutely brilliant.
And Neil, at full time, do you get down onto the pitch? Do you get a medal? How did the Champions League work at that stage?
Well, I'd had my operation by that point, so I was struggling to walk. But we were on sort of the upper tier of the stand, and I don't know what the official crowd was. It must have been 69,000, let's say. There was been about 9,000 AC Milan. The rest, Liverpool fans, nearly 60,000 Liverpool fans packed inside this stadium, all wanting to get on the pitch at the end of the game. I was one of about 10 players not involved in my Liverpool tracksuit, thinking, I want to get on the pitch. I want to say well done to my mates, my teammates who've just achieved this unbelievable cup success. So we managed to work our way down to the bottom of the stand, like I say, in our tracksuits. And there's stewards everywhere stopping us getting onto the pitch. And we try and get onto the pitch. This Turkish steward pretends he doesn't understand a word English. No, you're not getting on. So one of the players who was involved with us, who was cup-tied, was Fernando Morientes. Now, Fernando had played in the Champions League for, I think, Real Madrid that season, so he was cup-tied. So he started talking to the steward, and the steward's sort of believing him, not really believing him. In the end, Morientes gets his passport out, says to the steward, there we go, there's proof. Fernando Morientes have scored in 2, 3, whatever it is, Champions League finals. Next thing, the steward, who's been blanking us all, big hugs around Fernando Morientes. Oh, you're my hero. You can come onto the pitch, no problem. And fair play to Fernando Morientes. He made sure every one of us, there was about 10 in total, got onto the pitch as well, so we could enjoy that moment with the rest of the team. So we got onto the pitch just before Steven Gerrard lifted the trophy on the podium, and I sneak on just back right, something like that, and join in the celebrations for an iconic moment.
It's Neil Miller there talking about the power of a European passport. They should have rolled that out for part of the Brexit campaign for the Remain, obviously. Anyway, if you want to get involved this morning, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. We're starting our lockdown load. I think we should change this to lock in at this stage. It's certainly today has a little bit of a lock in theme to it, Owen, but I think I'm petitioning us here to change the name from lockdown lowdown to lock in lowdown.
No? Why does today have a lock in feel to it?
Well, we'll get to that in a couple of minutes' time. I'm going to start with this one. Liam Moran was in touch with this. He writes, maybe it's the sports withdrawal symptoms at off the ball, but I've watched this 3 times and I might watch the highlights tonight. This was uploaded by Christian McCoskey and it is the Italian goalkeeping cat. Not bad.
No, it certainly isn't. Like, I wonder, was this just kind of a coronavirus discovery for the owner of this particular cat, that they had this particular talent? And I also wonder what is the cliche used for good goalkeeping cats, because of course for good human goalkeepers, the cliche would be cat-like reflexes. So what did they actually use? I fear for the commentators here in this case, the people who might be dealing with this particular cat's five-a-side. What a couple of stops though. Gianluigi, the cat here, clearly amazing, and of course he's Italian because he's a good goalkeeper.
Yeah, the cat-like reflexes, I like that. Speaking of missing sport, I got the kids to race up the stairs doing wheelbarrows last night, and a man gave us about half an hour of two of the kids who just made their OTB debut were pretty good at it. So I might start filming that and offering odds if anybody wants to get in touch with us.
I can't quite tell if that's cruel or not, going up the stairs doing wheelbarrows. Like, of course, there's less chance of you actually landing on your head and causing serious damage, but it is hugely taxing on your upper body, I'd imagine.
Exactly, but they're kids, so they don't know any better. I mean, obviously, I haven't done it, but maybe before the end of this, I'll be able to do a whole circuit all the way up the stairs. We have a small house; it's okay. It's not that many steps. It's only like 40.
We look forward to that. The next one, it's from Twitter. Desi Sloyan posted his impressive GA jersey collection, and quite the collection here. Just to go through them, you can clearly see Tyrone. You've got Antrim, you've got Cork, you've got Longford, got Donegal, is that London in the top right? You've got Roscommon, Sligo, Kildare, got Armagh, Westmeath, an unbelievable collection, and a couple of classics. The Mayo there is, of course, an icon of the genre, and the Clare goalkeeper jersey at the bottom right, I want to say, is that a Davy Fitz special?
All right. Hopefully this sets in train everybody sharing their classic shirts, collections, and stuff that they have at home and on their walls. We've obviously already heard about David Myler's amazing collection. He's clearly into it. And then it was Gigi Buffon who has Stephen Hunt's, and they swap shirts. Buffon asked for Hunt's, apparently.
Wait,
that's amazing.
Have you ever figured out where that is?
Where Hunt's jersey is in Buffon's house. We should ask. I mean, at this point, Gigi Buffon's just sitting there waiting for his phone to ring for somebody to go, listen, this is going to seem a little weird given everything that's going on, but we're very interested to know, where is your Stephen Hunt jersey? What part of your massive estate is the Stephen Hunt jersey?
It's kind of mad, like that, to think about it, that Gigi Buffon goes about his business and walks by a Stephen Hunt jersey occasionally. Like, I don't know what part it is. Maybe it's like going in to get the lawnmower out. Maybe it's to, I don't know, go to the utility room to get a roll of black bags for the bin. But chances are he does something like that when he walks by his Stephen Hunt jersey. Gigi Buffon, that brings me great joy, that idea.
Yeah, It's class. Okay, so we also came across this, which is Warren Gatland getting loose. And, I think we should all be proud of Warren Gatland for what he's doing here. He is bringing it. This is from, they sent this video into New Zealand. Is it New Zealand Sky Sports? Is that where this was?
I don't know, but whoever they are, I am hugely thankful for this. There's always something very unusual about seeing a coach or a manager dancing so brilliantly. Like, obviously, of course, we've seen Sam Allardyce do it on the beach before. We've seen Roberto Martinez absolutely break it down at a Jason Derulo concert. But Warren Gatland here, he has absolutely got it. He is getting down, as the kids say.
Is he pissed? That's my question. Is that like the kids filming their dad drunk and they're doing dancing beside him, kind of, properly coordinated, and they're like, here, listen, film dad there, this will go viral. Is that like, have they entrapped him there, is what I'm asking? Or is he actually just doing a bit of exercise and this is he's watching Joe Wicks is doing a bit of stuff and their kids are like, yeah, come on, let's do this, and actually, or is he actually having the crack on the beach? Looks like he's in a nice gaff as well.
It looks like he may just thought it was a TikTok, but like that's all the rage right now. Kids getting their dads to TikTok with them, and you get a few extra views for it. So I think shame on you, Gatland family, for using your dad's name like that just to get a few extra hits. But I like it.
Next,
we've got Dana White. Yeah, he's found a solution to the impact of the coronavirus on his business. He's planning fights on his own fight island, and he's been speaking to ESPN.
So this place where this fight's going to be on April 18th, I have locked up for 2 months. So I'm going to continue to pump fights out. I've also secured an island. I've got an island. The infrastructure is being built right now. We're going to do all of our international fights on this island. The UFC will be back up and running internationally and here in the States. We're going back to back to back. We're getting back into our regular schedule. Mm-hmm. So we will have postponed 3 fights. We'll make all these fights up and we'll be right back on schedule starting April 18th.
How about transport? How are you planning on getting these fighters to your secret location?
So what we're going to do is we're going to get the fighters somewhere, and we're going to bring them to this location. They won't know where they're headed to.
Okay. Like maybe they'll collect like geographically, like if some of them are closer.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're working on it right now. But there's going to be, definitely some planes involved and things like that, especially for this island when we pull off the island.
Dana White sounds like the shittest reality television producer the world has ever seen. That or the Canadian Donald Trump, in terms of his assuredness that this thing is going to work. We're working it out. It's going to be fine. This is absurd. I would like to suggest a couple of islands here. I think Tory Island off the north of Ireland could be a particularly good choice. Could do the Isle of Man. Somewhere close around here. I think you could get a lot of islanders to help out and put together a good event.
Wasn't the Fire Festival supposed to originally be on an island, but actually wasn't on an island in the end? Would that island be able to, if there's no crowds coming, whatever that island is, it would look good. It would be like the perfect kind of pop culture eating itself circle. Is like, actually, we were able to make this work. We were able to get the infrastructure on the island.
That took place in the Bahamas, which are all islands. So I presume it was a real island. Just do not contact Ja Rule. That is the only rule here for Dana White. Do not contact him and everything should be okay.
If you remember, it was supposed to be on an island, but then they moved it because
Oh, sorry.
I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Remember, the island wasn't big enough because they couldn't get any jacks on it. So, it would neatly tie up the whole loo roll and all that kind of stuff that's going on. We've got 2 minutes to finish here, right? With lockdown restrictions impeding, I'm just going to read this script. With lockdown restrictions, this is before we get to the shame, the moment of shame for the entire Off the Ball team. There is this absolutely amazing picture we need to show you. So obviously, lockdown restrictions have impeded people's ability to Instagram last night's supermoon, but James Crombie from Info captured this incredible shot for everybody to enjoy. This is from, I don't know how to pronounce this properly, is it Crowan Hill in County Offaly? Is it Croggan Hill? But it's from Offaly, and James Crombie of Info Sports with, I think, the sports photograph of the year. We should hand him the gong right now because I think this did a lot of good for a lot of people last night to see the silhouette of the hurler against the supermoon. So that's pretty much all we've got time for. A reminder about our latest OTB Culture Club. Episode 1 was Andy Lee and Rocky 3. This morning we brought you Dermot Kennedy on Gladiator. That's all in association with Now TV. If you missed anything, you can catch it back on our podcast. But I want to tell you about Off the Couch today is boxer Ray Moylett, who, despite the fact that Nathan Murphy didn't put him on his Mayo Mount Rushmore, actually is teaching you how to get off the couch. So fair play to Ray, despite the fact that he was, badly treated by Nathan Murphy. He's not holding it against the rest of us. That's going live at 1 o'clock. Join him for that. But before we wrap today, we have to talk about this. This is Adrian Barry bringing shame. Hitting you with balls of your own shite would be too good for you, was Shane Stapleton's response on Twitter to this. You can make your own minds up. Adrian Barry has settled the proper way to put Guinness from a Guinness can into a receptacle with this. Have a look. We'll see you tomorrow, folks.
Sanjay.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Paddy Power Half Hour, exclusive to OTB Sports.